And we are live. Hey, we are live. What is up, everybody? I'm about to bring Brett Dasovic here because he's not been on in a while because, as you know, like things got too crazy and busy in my life, and I was like, oh, we have to go on hiatus for a bit with the collaborations. But I really missed it. I was really sad, and so I'm excited to bring him on again to talk about the Menendez brothers. And Brett, I'm going to go ahead and bring you in. How do I get off this solo layout? Anyway, Brett Dasovic from Pop Culture Crisis. Oh shit.
Yep.
already things are screwing up. Just a second. There we go. What's up?
How's it going? How you been?
Good, good. Man, we have a whole 6 people on right now who are just on the edge of their
Oh, I
seat
bet. Hello,
talk
6
about
people.
to talk about the Menendez brothers. Oh my God. Well, I should have known better because if it's not Marilyn Manson or it's not Johnny Depp, then the algorithm is not going to push it. But y'all, I wanted to talk about this because I'm fascinated by it. And Brett, before I ask you about your knowledge or lack thereof or familiarity or interest in this, I want to say the title of this video, it's totally ironic,
Okay.
and in the sense that I'm fully aware that there are a lot of people who are disgusted with what they see as this kind of pop culture celebration
Mhm.
of a gruesome, horrific story, gruesome, horrific act. And so I put this in there because I totally acknowledge that what I am doing here, making videos about this, talking about this, I have no idea actually if it's something that is a good positive thing or if I'm feeding a kind of beast. So I don't know. Do you have opinions on that? Do you talk about that on
Yeah.
PCC?
Actually, it is that is one of those things that I find really, really interesting, right? Because we're full to the brim in culture with stories about violence and gore from the fiction perspective, right?
Mm.
But we do live in a time now where there's a very, very heavy interest in true crime, and funnily enough, it's interesting that it skews towards women, that they seem to really, really love true crime. But I do wonder sometimes. Again, I'm nobody who's going to tell you not to make your art or anything like that, but I do at least ask myself the philosophical question once in a while, like, at a certain point, when we make so many stories, like, a lot has been made. Again, now you know a lot about the Menendez brothers,
No, go for
series
it.
on.
Don't censor yourself.
you
Yes,
know you know
you're
a lot
good.
about the Menendez series on Netflix and all that stuff, and we only really covered, Ryan Murphy's initial response to the criticisms of it. And the first thing that I found funny was like his kind of cavalier attitude towards not talking to them, which I just thought was very interesting, to make something based on on 2 people without having spoken to
Did
them.
he not? I didn't know that. You know something I don't.
Yeah,
Did Murphy
he
not
did.
talk
No,
to
he
them?
said he had no interest in speaking to them. And I just said, if you're making something with their names stamped on it, you could probably
Yeah.
look those quotes up right
No,
there,
I'm not checking you. I'm looking at something
like,
else, but that's
but it
keep
might be
going.
interesting to look up there. Like, if you're going to make something with their name stamped on it, it feels like to me there should at least be a desire and an initial attempt to reach out and speak to them. Because otherwise, what you're doing is, given the fact that they've said that there's a lot of elements of that series, and again,
Mhm.
take my word for, at face value, I didn't see the series, but I don't know how much they editorialized in these series. But I just start to wonder, at what point do you just make it with new characters, and are you just using the name of these 2 real people and this very real tragedy to market your show, because right now true crime has such a stranglehold on pop culture?
Yeah, no, you bring up some great points, and by the way, I was just checking to make sure that I had done everything right on the technical side with, like,
Yeah.
making it public and stuff, so I was totally listening to you, though. So, like, 2 things that I think are really interesting that you bring up. First of all, um, to what extent is something like this bound does it need to stick to the truth? Well, and I
Yeah.
truth is this wishy thing, and there's different versions of it. But definitely there were some things in this, and I don't need to go into it, but there were some things in this series that were factually probably not true or demonstrably not true, and a number of them were just small details, but things that did not happen or things that were, in fact, misrepresentations of reality. Like, for instance, I'll give you one example.
Okay.
One of the first scenes is the funeral for the parents, Jose and Kitty, and there is much made of the fact that this really inappropriate, I think it was a Milli Vanilli song in the series, in this episode, is played by Lyle at the funeral to commemorate the mother. Like, that didn't happen. That was kind of an attempt to represent the fact that the funeral was kind of strange and off key, and Lyle's eulogy was strange and off key or whatever. But like stuff
Mhm.
like that, I do ask myself, like, is that really necessary if you are presenting someone's life, particularly someone who's alive and there's controversy and a lot at stake, right?
Mhm.
So that's, I think, a really good point. I will say this though. I do think that Ryan Murphy's series, that Monsters, has really helped the Menendez brothers so much because it has brought this back into the public eye. I know that there were some documentaries and some things that had been made and were out. Like, there's a really interesting A&E series, Eric
Mhm.
Speaks, several episodes, and you can find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Show you some scenes maybe a little bit later, but like there's some good stuff or interesting stuff that's come out helpful to them. But this has made a seismic change for them, and it's fascinating to me to see that the situation has evolved from several months ago. It seemed like there was no way that these guys, they were going to rot in prison for the rest of their lives, and now honestly it seems like they're going to be probably home by Christmas.
Do you think that that's what's going to happen? Do you think they end up home that quickly? And do you believe that it is the popularity of the Netflix show that kind of dragged it back into the public consciousness?
I mean, I think that, yeah, I do. First of all, Gascon, who, there's no love lost between, from me and Gascon because of the way he's handled the Marilyn Manson situation. That's a whole other thing. But Gascon said in an interview recently talking about the Menendez situation that they could be home by Christmas. He
Mhm.
made some nod to that and so forth. Now, it is up to the judges. Gascon's office is going to make a recommendation for resentencing, or perhaps they already have. And then there's going to be some judges or a judge who decides on this, and then they'll be resentenced.
Yeah.
But apparently, there are a number of credible people who believe, watching this, who believe that they very well could be home by Christmas. Now, so I think that, so there's several dimensions to this, and I have actually some like videos and stuff I'm going to play in a little while. But I wanted to talk to you and then get to some comments in a moment. But I think that there's several interesting aspects to this, but I think the central question is this idea of if they were abused, which it does seem that that's the weight of the evidence and
Mhm.
testimony and so forth, that it does seem that they were significantly abused. They were raped
Mhm.
on many occasions, and tortured sadistically and so forth. The question is, were they were they justified in to some degree killing their parents? Did they kill them because of the abuse, or were these selfish reasons? The inheritance was going to be cut off, they thought, et cetera, et cetera. And then this
Mhm.
other question of, like, I guess, how much time should they serve for that? Is 35 years enough? Like, do you have any thoughts on that, if you buy the idea that they were horribly abused throughout their childhoods?
Well, certainly they talk a lot about how that type of situation would be what I guess what they call mitigating factors, right? As to
Mhm.
why the crime was perpetrated.
Right.
But to me, when I hear stories like this, I guess I look it through the lens of like pushing modernity, where I almost have a hard time paying attention to those details because I see so much these days about how the legal system doesn't seem to want to put people in jail to begin with these days. And so it's like I was laughing with someone in a very morose way where I said, they're even letting the people who were referenced on Criminal Minds episodes out of jail now. What is this country coming to? But I guess I hadn't really thought about it because the hardest part is just like, look, there is no all the claims in the world. Again, I don't know. Is there evidence that this actually happened? Is there, and that's the hardest part, as I'm sure you've talked about endlessly on these things, is this is the type of crime, the crimes that were perpetrated against them are the types of crime that don't tend to have any physical evidence because people either don't go to, obviously, and that's not even getting into,
No, no,
what
you're right.
what it
Great
means
point.
for men to
Mhm.
be victims of crimes like sexual assault. But without, there's not going to be video of it. There's not going to be proof of the mitigating circumstances. So when you go to court and you say that this happened to me, in the court of law, all that is he said, she said. So it's very hard for a person to necessarily buy it. And those who do, we tend to be, because we so fiercely protect and defend children, and we want so badly to believe that no harm will ever happen to them. And when it does, we're truly, horrified by it, that in the eyes of the law, without the proof, it's almost impossible to know whether it actually happened. Again, you may have more.
So let me tell you, well, let me throw some things at you, and then
Okay.
I'd be curious to see if you think, assuming these are, accurate, I'm representing them correctly, right? So, um, a number of relatives testified both in the first trial and then have been saying ever since, on various, documentaries and so
Mhm.
forth. A number of relatives, even relatives, some relatives of Kitty Menendez, of the mother, have testified that in fact there were signs of abuse when they were children. And I'll give you one. This is probably the most compelling. There was a relative, I believe it was a cousin or an aunt, I think an aunt of the Menendez kids, and she was staying over at the Menendez house. And in the middle of the night, one of the children, I can't remember Lyle or Eric, but one of the children comes in the middle of the night and says, "Can I stay in here because Daddy has been coming into my bedroom and he's been forcing us to touch each other, etc." I mean, the details, I'm going to try to go light because they do get horrific. So she testified to this, that she confronts the mom and says, "Hey, your kid is saying that the dad is molesting him, that your husband's molesting
Yeah.
him." And Kitty, the mom, takes, apparently, according to testimony, takes the kid by the arm, kind of drags him back into the bedroom, basically says, we're not going to talk about this anymore, and nothing happened. Now, there was also a cousin of the Menendez brothers who testified. He's dead now. He overdosed on pills years ago.
Mm.
But there was a cousin who had a number of conversations with one of the Menendez brothers, in which at that point he confided that his dad had been molesting him and raping him and doing very sadistic things even beyond that. But anyway, so and then recently what's happened is that a letter from years ago was uncovered, in which one of the Menendez brothers was actually writing to this cousin saying it's happening again. And I guess
Mhm.
they have a way of validating these these letters, these types of evidence, and they can go back and look that, okay, it was from this particular period. I don't know how, paper or whatever, but they go back
Mhm.
and they validate. But it seems like the prosecutor's office in Gascon have accepted that this letter is legit because Gascon has been promoting it himself. So you've got the DA, who's in charge basically of the situation, recommending it to judges for resentencing, who is posting this new evidence.
Mhm.
So I think that, and so, and there are other things. It seems like no one has a good word to say about this dad.
Yeah.
There are a couple of things that I posted we can look at later, but where people who worked with Jose said that he would be on their top 5 list of people who would get murdered because he was so hated. Another
Oof.
guy was talking about how he was like one of the worst human beings that he had ever met. And I'm not saying that that means that someone deserves to get shotgunned just because people, work with him are saying he's an asshole. But it does seem like we have here with this guy, with Jose, this dad, like a really pathological personality. Now,
Yeah.
what do you think about the fact that they killed the mom too? People who are skeptics of the Menendez brothers say, look,
Mhm.
the mom and the dad, they're sitting here, they're eating ice cream, they're doing something completely benign, no matter the history, doing something completely benign. And these kids, they're boys, they're adult boys actually. They come out of nowhere with these shotguns and they don't just blow them away and run. It was an extensive process of killing these parents because they didn't die immediately, particularly the mom. They had to go back and reload and come back and kill her. What do you think about that?
So they almost, it's almost as if they see the mom's willingness to let it go on as an even worse betrayal than what the father did. It feels like is what that says to me. Like, if I'm to take them at their word and say that this wasn't motivated by money and it wasn't motivated by inheritance, and it truly was the only way they saw out for all of this, is like they see what happened, as horrific as it was, secondary to the betrayal of the mother, who should be, is more synonymous with the idea of caregiver, allowing it to happen and, not stopping it.
I mean, it is interesting when you think about this dynamic of obviously the father, this sadistic, pathological, if we believe this narrative, sadistic,
Yeah.
pathological, monstrous guy, and yet this mom, what is going on there? if this is going on, for her to allow it and to sit down there and have a bowl of ice cream with this guy who has been, sodomizing her kids.
Yeah.
It is really, I think that's one of the reasons why people are interested in this case so much, because there is, and I'll talk about this later, but there really is this like crazy like paradox to this, of on the one hand this sort of normal all American family living the American dream in Beverly Hills, and this guy who worked his way up from a dishwasher, immigrant, et cetera,
Hmm.
seemingly adorable children, etc., right? And then
Yeah.
on the other hand, this like monstrous, horrific, like element to it that I don't know, can't really be integrated. I think it's really interesting. But I want to look at the comments
Yeah.
to those 31 who are with us.
Hello,
Thank
31.
you. Thank you. What I will do though, and I appreciate you for being here, Brett, because
Yep.
I've been wanting to, I'll tell you honestly, like one of my intentions with this is that I have been wanting to do some Menendez videos on this topic. And I just couldn't really, for some reason, get comfortable or motivated to just sit down and start talking about it myself, because it's a little out of my wheelhouse. And so I'm going to take, if you don't mind, some cuts from this and make videos. So anyway, I appreciate you being here for that.
Yep.
So Paige, I don't know. I'd be interested to see if you came around on this. Paige said, "I don't want to hear about the Menendez brothers. They are disgusting. Disgusting, though. I knew what you meant. Oh, it's a typo. What do you think about that, Brett? Do you have a thought on that?"
I mean, I think these are the types of things where, again, real life is just so hard for people to. I would love to hear if these are if Paige, who left the comment there, what her thought was on the other stories that you've covered, whether it's Manson, whether it's Till, all of these other stories. They have their own sort of flavor to all of the details, but this case is just, it's so legendary in American history that I feel like almost everyone has heard of the Menendez brothers, even if they aren't aware of the facts of the situation or what actually happened.
Right.
Also, I mean, it was how long ago now? They've been in prison for 35 years.
35 years. Yeah, this happened
35
in
years.
89.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, what this says more is just how weird it is to have the distance that we have from so many horrific stories that get turned into Hollywood art, right? So
Right.
you could have 5 people who agree on one story and want to talk to you about the Johnny Depp, but then have 5 people, those same 5 people might see things completely differently when it comes to the Menendez brothers, because it has been turned into a form of entertainment for most people to watch.
Well, and I think, with the Johnny Depp and the Manson thing, people would say, well, they're innocent and those were hoaxes. And so it's different than this case where these guys admit that they
Yes.
shotgunned their parents. But at the same time, though, I mean, you bring up an interesting point of like, it's really hard to figure out what horrific aspects of history are okay to cover, or what's a good, or what's an appropriate, or a
Yeah.
way, if is there even an appropriate way when we talk about art to covering certain things. But let me make a case here, and by the way, I don't at all mind that comment, Paige, because I think that a lot of people are feeling that way, like in society, about these types of things and the celebritization of crime and true crime. But let me say what I think is compelling about this, beneath a sort of superficial level. And first of all, actually, let me say one thing about Ryan Murphy. If you have seen Monsters, if you've
Mhm.
seen this Netflix show, you are getting a taste of, and I hate to sound like some old school feminist here, but you are getting a taste of the male gaze back
Yeah.
on you guys, because it really is interesting how a gay man directs and, I guess, photographs. I know he wasn't the photographer, but he sort of, sets the tone for the vision for the style and how these guys are going to look,
Yeah.
with the open chest and the perfectly chiseled, abs and everything, right? And the kind of the plump lips and all of that. And I just want to say that, like, it's interesting to see the way that these characters are depicted through the gaze of a gay man who is looking at them in a more, like, sort of a different way, or sexually
Mhm.
objectifying way. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I do think it's interesting some of the comments people have made of like, why are they so chiseled, and why are they so like hot, and what's with the
Well,
pink.
that's an even more interesting point, because, like, look, it's one thing to talk about.
Let me get some
Oh,
pictures while we're talking.
yeah,
No, keep going.
it's one thing to talk about objectification and stuff when you're talking about movies and television that are fiction,
Mhm.
which is a very real discussion that plenty of people have all the time about, should we be looking at, should we be photographing them? Obviously, by photographing, we mean putting them on video in such a
Mhm.
way. But the thing is it's a visual medium. It's always been a visual medium. And most of the time, the desire is for the director and the cinematographer to create an art style that looks pleasing to the eye for the people whose demographic they're trying to reach. And then you get into the completely other conundrum is how does that relate when we're no longer telling the story of, a fictional character, but we get into true stories. Now they've been doing that for decades with actual movies, right? Like with plenty of like documentaries, or not even documentaries, biopics, right? So we've been
Right.
getting the good stories about real people for years with actors who are significantly better looking or in real good shape. I remember the story about the guy from Argo that Ben Affleck portrayed, talking about how Ben Affleck was about 4 inches taller than him, or quite a
Oh,
bit
was
taller
he
than him.
really? A lot more
Yeah,
attractive?
and
Yeah, yeah.
and that's the way it is. It's a visual medium, so it is up to you, the viewer, to decide whether you find the fact that these are real people a more objectifying manner than if they were just doing this for some fictional television show.
Yeah, so, like, this I think those are great points, and, like, this is the way that one of the
Mhm.
Menendez brothers, Lyle, I think, is depicted at times, and so I'm not saying it's negative or positive, but it does tie into, again, what you're saying of this question of, like, to what degree can we change who these people are in our
Yeah.
depiction of them? Okay, so sorry,
Yeah.
there we go. You're back. Um So this question of like, I think of whether it's appropriate to be interested in this. Let me make my case. I think that one of the things that's really interesting about this again is that line between the all-American, beautiful, perfect family, the exterior, right, and then what's actually going on underneath this like this horrific thing that's hidden, this horrific dynamic. And I think that that is made that contrast in that is made really sharp in this film. And I think in real life, I think a lot of people still we have trouble conceptualizing the horrors of child abuse.
Yeah.
I think that and look, if you read into the history of this case, it was interesting how during the first trial there was a huge gender split between the women on the juries who believed that abuse took place
Mhm.
and sympathized with the two brothers, and then
Mhm.
apparently a lot of men who thought that it just couldn't believe that these guys would quote allow themselves to be raped once they got to be older. And I think that society, we may have become too focused on victimization in a lot of ways, and with like the excesses of Me Too that I've talked about, but
Mhm.
we have come a long way, I think, in realizing and facing the fact that no, men can be abused and people can be abused even when maybe physically it would seem like they're strong enough to fight back. And
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that the series does really well, the Ryan Murphy series, is it really shows you how terrifying this guy was and how intimidating. And you could totally see how from the youngest age, he had basically just browbeaten his children, not only physically, but like
Mhm.
psychologically. Listen, they really are kind of like Stockholm syndrome or like prisoners of war or whatever. And I really do. This is what I'll say about the will and the inheritance and all that. I totally understand that it looks really bad that that was the catalyst. It seems in a number of in some ways a catalyst for them
Mhm.
killing the parents, and that there was certainly a kind of a financial element or interest in there. I get that, but let me just say this: whatever monsters they might have become at that moment, they were created through years and years and years of insane abuse. I mean, abuse so bad that I can't even like talk about it because it would be
Yeah.
way too offensive for people to actually hear it. And so years and years and years of that, of course you're going to create fucked up human beings. That's what you're going to have. But these guys they were barely out of childhood. They were totally fucked up. The mother was in on it too, And what do you think that does to someone's psyche when not only do they have to deal with abuse, but they have to deal with their only source of seeming protection in this world, the woman who gave birth to them, nodding, it's okay. Yeah, no, it's
Well, that
fine.
was that was why I mentioned it earlier, right? That's why that
Right.
seemed it made sense to me that as evil as the father's behavior was, as horrific of a
Right.
betrayal of that is between a parent and a child, the mother's ability to just let this happen and not intervene, perhaps to them seemed like an even greater, more horrific thing, because the father has one role in the household, but a mother truly is supposed to be that nurturing, caring persona, that person that's supposed to protect you. The father is supposed to protect you physically, but the mother is supposed to be there emotionally in a way that even a lot of people believe that fathers aren't necessarily always going to be there, right? So that
Right.
betrayal, for her to give way and allow that behavior to happen, it does make sense to me. On the point of the jury, like, was there at the trial, is there any, like, do the men have issue with the fact that there isn't physical evidence, or of these things happening?
So I
Like,
don't.
pragmatically, it feels like an issue that men would have more of an issue with. Like, the women are going to hear the story and they're going to believe it and they're going to say, that's horrible, I understand your actions are justified. But a lot of men are going to be like, look, you're asking me to let you off killing this guy,
And
and
rightly
outside of a
so.
sob story, that's not what I'm calling it, that's
No,
just
no, no,
how
no,
i'm
no.
how i'm imagining
Good
that they
point.
would see something like this, is that the male brain, which might be more linear thinking and attempting to take a very horrific situation that is full of just the worst of the human experience
Right.
and delineate it down and break it down to manageable pieces. And to them, if what they're told is that you have to, base this based on whether you believe this person or not, then they have a hard time saying, I'm not willing to let this go off of a he said, she said, where that person is no longer able to speak for themselves. Now, I don't know if that's actually what happened. It's just how I imagine there was at least some perspectives. And remember, this is back in what, the 70s?
Well, so this was the early 90s.
So like, we're talking the 90s, like your perspectives on, first of all, like you said earlier, the human perspective in America on male, sexual assault was a
Right.
completely different thing than what it is now. How we
Right.
view victims of crimes like this is a very different thing than what it is now.
Right.
I'm not shocked that things went the way that they did.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point, and you put it as well as it can be put, that we need to have a charitable perspective toward these men, because they were probably coming at this from the perspective that I think you and I have about Me Too often, is that
Mhm.
it's not just enough to have allegations,
Yeah.
as you actually do need to have evidence. And so where I think that time has really helped the Menendez brothers in their case on this, is that I think that there were a number of people who thought that maybe the relatives were lying to get these
Yeah.
guys off, because there were a number of relatives who, if you believe them, they offered very, very credible, compelling stories indicating
Okay.
that there
Yeah.
was that there would. But I will say this though, that there were a number of people, and I saw a juror who was interviewed who even said this, that they didn't know perhaps if the relatives were being in some way paid off, or if, because there was this assumption that the Menendez brothers now had a lot of money, even though the government ended up taking him. It's a long story, and there's a lot of debt too. But there was a perception that maybe these relatives had either been paid off or that they just wanted to help them avoid the death penalty. Because remember,
Yeah.
the death penalty, the fucking electric chair. This is old school shit. The electric chair was an option. I mean, that could have happened.
Yeah.
And so I think it's logical to say that, and let me say one more thing. Leslie Abramson, the attorney, a very famous, hard-charging female attorney, right,
Mhm.
for one of the Menendez brothers, led the defense. She had just gotten another client off prior to the Menendez brothers for a similar defense, sexual abuse. And so I think also there was skepticism in the media about this, like, oh, is this just her trick that she keeps trying, again, it's too
Yeah.
convenient. So anyway, I think you make a great point. And so I think then that leads into the idea that time has really been helpful for this case for these guys, because these relatives have not gone away. There's no more money left. There's nothing for them to get from this.
But they've
And
held to their story.
they've held to their story, and some of them are in terrible health, and they've trekked all the way to LA to stand on the steps of, the LA courthouse. And
Mhm.
one lady, the sister of Kitty Menendez, now understand this, this is the sister of the mother that they shotgunned. She could barely stand. She had to have people holding her up, but she gave this impassioned plea for them to be let go, and said that there was horrible abuse. And she's done interviews saying that they felt, even at the time when they were kids, that there was something bad going on, etc. So I think that now the case for them getting out, it is powerful, particularly if you think that it was a manslaughter situation of some degree.
Yeah.
They've served 35 years. So, I don't know that people should get off absolutely scot-free. I understand there's a precedent here and we can't have vigilante justice, et cetera. Although, as I said on Instagram, there's also a part of me that thinks, well, if, I'm not going to lose any sleep over someone who's been raped
Yeah.
horribly like that, offing the person who did it, right? But anyway, if you want a manslaughter charge, you want even a second-degree murder charge, fine, whatever, but they've served that. It's been 35 years. So I just think that's an interesting argument. Okay, what I want to do here, I want to get through the super chats, and then we're going to take a break. And because I have like a number of things lined up, I've already we tested the video, like it's cool, but I have clips lined up, and I just need to organize them a few minutes. And I don't know if Brett's going to stick around because he has something
I'll,
going on.
yeah, I got. Well, yeah, I'll probably be here till 9:30, 9:45.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so like another like 15, 20 minutes or
Yeah.
so. Okay,
Yep.
we'll just take a short little break and then come back and you can stick around for a little while. But let's do the super chats. So Shane Wilder's here.
You asked earlier. Yes, Shane.
Shane, I was trying to put you in the post on Twitter, but it wasn't coming up for me. I don't know if like you're sort of shadow banned for me or what's going on, but your name was not coming up. And so I still mentioned you in the post, but I just couldn't tag you. And so I asked Brett, I said, is Shane Wilder okay? I
I
cannot
said, yeah,
find
he was on the
him.
show. He was watching the
I'm
show
glad.
today.
To those who don't know, Shane Wilder is, if I can say this in a way that doesn't sound weird or tacky, he is Brett's biggest fan, I think.
He just loves. He loves PCC. He's there for every
He's a
show every
great
day.
fan.
Shane's the man.
I love his memes, Shane. I need you
Yep.
to make some memes for me like you make for
Shane
him.
humbles me with his memes on a daily basis.
So Shane said, hey, Kurtz and Dasovic are back. I had to switch over from IRL. It's a rough one tonight. Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't think we want to get into that here, but like I just
Yeah.
want to acknowledge that there's some stuff going on your side of the
Yeah.
fence.
I'll hang out till 9:30, 9:45.
Yeah,
We're
and
good.
so like people understand like there's a reason why he might have to check out.
Mm.
Thoughts and prayers. Dan Campbell says, check PayPal. Kurtz, I don't have sufficient interest to validate any of this, but Devin Tracy is an honest researcher. He doesn't believe the accusations by the brothers. Is Devin the guy who also has talked about the Cuomo Me Too thing as a hoax? I think that might be the same guy, which obviously I like that perspective. Well, I will definitely check him out. Let me look at PayPal here and see what your comment is. So I don't have it linked here, but I do have a PayPal, and when people donate, I will read the comment. So that's another thing you can do. So I'm gonna do that. Shane, Dwayne, Shane. I almost called you Shane.
Yeah.
Okay, it says Kurtz, how certain are you that the brothers are telling the truth? So I have some doubts. Yeah, so I think what I'd like to do when I come back in a few minutes is I have a list here, but just kind of go through the list just very quickly, like in just like a couple of minutes here, tick through the list and explain. But I don't have a sense of this like I would like the Manson situation or anything. And this is not
Yeah.
like a big like cause for me or anything like that. But I do have kind of a long-standing history with this going back to when I was a little girl, and I'll talk about that maybe a bit as well. So yeah, that's a good comment. I guess I'll answer it more fully when I come back. Okay, everybody, those of you who want to stick around, we'll see if we have a few of you to tough it out. Let's take like a 5 minutes, and I'm going to get some clips lined up. And if Brett comes back, we'll go through some of those and talk. And yeah, be back. Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay, I am back. Let me put my headphones back on. Oh, and I'm going to bring Brett on. Sorry, Brett. What's up?
Hello.
So you are
Am
back.
I good? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so what's really funny, so since I switched to a new mic, I keep having these issues with my Scarlett where it will just cut out in the middle of the show. So very likely what's going to happen is I'm going to be talking and monologuing, and it's just going to cut out, and we're going to have to wait like 15 seconds while it lets me unmute it because it like sets and then resets, and it's a huge hassle. So
It's going to cut out at the worst moments, I'm sure.
it will. I'll be making some great point, and then it's just going to cut out right then.
Well, so I have some scenes here that I've got. So we tested these earlier and they worked. So hopefully they work again. But I want to go through several different things. First of all, this is the 93-year-old aunt of the brothers and the sister of Kitty Menendez. That is their mom. And this is her just like a week or so ago speaking. She traveled to LA for this. She's in bad health, speaking on the steps of, I think, the LA courthouse. So let me pull this up. This is a short one. I've got some longer ones in a minute, but here we go. Okay, I'm going to take. All right, it's good enough. Okay. Oh, wait, that's not it. Just a second. Here we go.
They were just children who could have been protected and were instead brutalized in the most horrific ways. They were just children who could have been protected and were instead brutalized in the most horrific ways. The truth is, Lyle and Eric were failed by the very people who should have protected them, by their parents, by the system, by society at large. Lyle and Eric have already paid a heavy price, discarded by a system that failed to recognize their pain. They have grown, they have changed, and they have become better men despite everything that they've been through. It's time to give them the opportunity to live the rest of their lives free from the shadow of their past. They were just children.
All right. So, I look at something like that and I think not only, this hasn't just happened. This has been now years. And this lady still has, I guess, this kind of conviction to emotional conviction about this, to travel to LA in bad health and to speak out. And she's the sister of a woman who was shotgunned. Like, I don't know. Do you have a way of explaining that where it's not good for the Menendez brothers? Like, it doesn't validate them?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, like, I guess if you were going to take a cynical perspective,
Yeah.
a more cynical on this, like, what would you say?
Well, look, the way I see it is the idea here that mitigating circumstances would have changed what they were charged with initially, right? So is that what the argument is, that given, if we're to take the allegations of abuse as truth, and that is what actually happened, that if that had been accepted by the DA at the time, they would have chosen to, I suppose, go for a manslaughter charge, and they would have done what, 5 years?
So.
10
Yeah,
years?
I think that is the gist of it. Yeah, I think so.
I mean, it's hard to refute that, but again, for a lot of people, I think that for these cases, it might be the best evidence forward is that the family is still willing to come out and speak about this, right?
Right.
That it's
Right.
not financially motivated and all that. I don't know. I have a hard time with it. Like you said, this is a very hard one to go, because it's not like we're trying to talk about someone's guilt or innocence. We're trying to talk about whether the allegations of what supposedly happened to them, without there being physical evidence to prove so. Again, in a court of law, it's not about your personal opinion. In a court of law, whether that mitigates what they did. And I don't know. It's what it does, if anything, is it proves why shows like this are so successful. It proves to you why Netflix greenlights a project like this and things like this get made. Same with Ryan Murphy doing Dahmer before that. These cases have been a matter of public interest for decades. And I think for as long as, mass media is a thing, there will be a fascination with these cases that show you the worst of human existence while trying to show it to you in a way that gives you something to watch while you're making dinner. And that dichotomy is very, very strange to me. I don't know how I feel about them getting out. I honestly, I think I would it would be very hard for me to make that assertion without looking into it more, I guess.
Does it matter to you if they have been rehabilitated, if they are quote unquote good people, or does that not figure into the equation?
That doesn't figure.
Oh, you just cut out. Oh, it was just like we said. It was going to be the moment of the highest profundity. It cut out. How long before you come back? Okay, I'm going to keep talking while you're waiting. But let me just say, oh, you're back. You're back.
Okay.
Say it again.
Like I said, like that, it's very easy to make the claim of being a good person. Like, I guess that doesn't, politically, that doesn't really work in my brain as something where, what does that mean? By good person, do you mean that they're doing good deeds for others?
They're not going to shotgun you in your house while you're eating ice cream. How about that?
On the show, Mary's point was essentially that she doesn't, like, to her, the biggest piece of evidence is that she doesn't believe that they're a threat to anyone else. Like, the idea here is like they committed a very specific crime against two very specific people because of a very specific unspeakable thing that happened to them, and that doesn't show that they're in any way a threat to other people.
Right. It's so interesting, all the different ways that questions like this, like morally, ethically, can be analyzed. And so, and I said I was going to talk a bit about myself, but let me show actually another scene. So I don't know how many people are aware of this, but their story apparently is fascinating to a lot of people because there have been multiple movies and TV shows made about their story, varying degrees of quality. Did you ever see or hear about the Law and Order series based on the Menendez brothers?
There was a true crime, right? Like Law and Order. I forgot, because that got big after the O.J. Simpson true crime show did really,
the
really
riot,
well.
which was also Ryan Murphy, right?
Then after the O.J. Simpson one, all the networks were trying to jump on the true crime bandwagon. I remember that there was a Law and Order true crime version of this series.
So I am a big film nerd, and I love to do mashups. And I haven't done one here. I haven't had time, but I wanted to show everybody just this brief trailer. It's like a minute 30 seconds for the Law and Order version of this, because I think it's interesting to see like ways in which they're similar and different. And so look at this for just a minute. See, here we go. Okay.
My Genesis, this is where it all began.
Were there any problems between you and your parents?
This is what a little sissy does.
Lyle bought a new Porsche, Eric a Jeep. I'll take the gold and the diamonds on the dial.
You told me everything. How you shot your parents, where you bought the shotguns.
I'm going to go to the police and I'm going to tell them that Lyle and Eric confessed to you.
People like that don't just wake up one morning and turn into Charlie Manson.
Everybody thinks we were this perfect family. But we were a disaster.
So I want to lead the defense for both boys.
2 counts of murder have been filed against Lyle and Eric Menendez.
All the years of abuse finally drive them over the edge. And what they did is not the issue. It's why they did it.
This is where
Law and Order True Crime, the Menendez murders.
So I wanted to ask
Tuesdays
you
this fall
one thing.
on NBC.
Where is it? Where'd it go? Okay. What do you know anything about the psychiatrist or the psychologist that they saw? Okay, so this is a crazy sordid story, and let me just give you the 20-second version. So they had, prior to this, the Menendez brothers had done some petty theft in the neighborhood, and the cops had made this deal with the parents that if they went to see a therapist a certain number of times, then it would be like they'd go lighter on them or whatever, right? Keep it off the record. And so they were mandated by the court to go see this guy, Dr. Jerome Oil. And so anyway, this is background. They had seen him. He had seen the family, et cetera, et cetera. That was over with, right? Well, so when they killed their parents, Eric was feeling, so the younger one and the less, I guess we could say, emotionally tough one, he was feeling so upset about it in his conscience, pangs of conscience and all that, that he went to see this guy and he confessed at their meeting to what they had done. Right now, technically this is supposed to be like a whole, confidentiality patient
Yeah.
doctor thing, right? So technically, like, he was not allowed to share this. But listen to this craziness. He was having an affair with one of his patients who he had also convinced his wife to allow to move into the family home while he was having the affair. The wife didn't know, but he convinced the wife that this was like a patient in need and she needed a stabilizing force. And so could she move in with him for a little while?
Even
So,
that seems like highly unethical.
yeah,
Like,
absolutely. It's
like
fucking
even
nuts.
leave out the whole cheating part, the whole your doctor. It's so funny because I'm watching Penguin right now, and they
Yeah,
totally
it's
have
really good.
Sophia Falcone calls her therapist for help, and she wakes up at his house, and I'm like, I like Theo Rossi. Don't turn him into a creep. I don't want
No,
Theo
you're
Rossi to be a
right.
creep in this.
There's this
Yeah.
whole doctor-patient, sexual things going on. So let me show you
Yep.
this picture. So the long story short, this shrink named Jerome Oil was having an affair with a patient. So when Eric Menendez confesses to him late one afternoon that he and his brother did this, Oziel says, "We got to call your brother and let him know," and because he knew he was going to freak out, right? So they call the older brother Lyle and
Mhm.
they tell him, okay, he says, I've come clean to the doctor here, to the shrink here. Lyle freaks out. Lyle is going to come down to the office. Now in the meantime, Jerome Oziel, the shrink, he calls his girlfriend, his live-in girlfriend, who's very psychologically unstable / patient of his, right? And he
Mhm.
tells her to come down to the office, and because he wants her there, to deter them, I guess, killing him, or he claims he's scared, or he wants her a witness or
So he
whatever.
asks a woman to come in and try to prevent why? Because they've already proven they have no problem killing women. I don't see how this would actually prevent
I
anything
still
from happening.
don't really know. Some of the commenters might know better. I still don't really know, after all these iterations of the story, what exactly he was
It's like
thinking.
a story in a TV show where a really scummy dude, like where a
Yes.
guy brings a pregnant woman to a drug deal to discourage them from harming them. This is like the worst site. This is the worst
And he
doctor
knows
ever.
that she is this really unstable woman, right? That he has this tempestuous relationship with anyway. So he think, why did he think she was going to remain quiet? So she comes down there. She and Lyle both get there. She sits out in the waiting room or hides behind a door or something, whatever, right? And Lyle storms in. And basically, what happens is the doctor agrees that he's not going to tell anyone. He's not going to go to the police. He apparently tried to get some money off of them and said, I'd like
Ugh,
to invest in something with me too, but that's a whole other thing. But
wow.
anyway, long story short, he agrees that he's going to stay quiet, even though he's secretly taping them, which is also unethical without their consent. Well, this
Mhm.
is what happens. He breaks it off. Things get crazier with the crazy patient that he's having an affair with. He breaks it off with her. And guess what she does? She goes straight to the police and tells them, I've been having an affair with this guy who has all these tapes where the Menendez brothers are confessing to all this. So, like, that's
Holy
what
crap.
got them. And I think, and it's just like the craziest side story. Like they need their own show or something. These minor characters,
Yep.
but there are all these twists and turns. I think that do make it really fascinating. That's how this thing came out into the open. So anyway, I don't know. Do you need to leave?
I got another. Let's read the super chats there,
Okay,
and then
okay.
I will head out.
So we're gonna go through super chats here, and I'm gonna check my PayPal again in a minute. So Shane Wilder says, "You just forgot my middle initial. LOL. You'll never
Got to
find."
have the H in there.
Oh, Shane H. Wilder. Yeah, you
Yep.
do. You do sound much more esteemed, prestigious with that. You'll never find me without
Mm.
the H. Oh, and on Twitter, I gotcha. Okay, now I know. Now I know how to find you. Okay, Brett, I trust everything will be fine. I'll see you and Mary tomorrow.
Yeah, man. We'll
Uh,
see you tomorrow. We're just gonna keep the faith and keep moving.
And I want my viewers to know that, like, I offered for Brett to talk
Yeah.
about this if he wanted to. So it's not like I'm selfishly, narcissistically just
No.
ignoring what's going on over there. Dan Campbell says, "What's up, Dan? Regardless of whether the brothers' accusations were valid, I would still let them out after 3 decades if we're convinced they can live peaceably in society." Yeah, I think that's a
The
good point.
problem is then if something else happens, then
Oh, you mean like if they kill someone else, they shotgun someone else?
yeah, if something else happens, then that's a lot of egg on the face of the prosecutor or whoever it is that let him out. So
Well, and you bring up a good point here as to one of the reasons why they got kind of a raw deal in their second trial was because the OJ thing had just happened. He had just been freed, won
Mm.
his case. And so there was this perception then that the LADA just didn't know how to win celebrity cases. And also people were really pissed. I mean, do you remember how pissed I was I know you're a little younger than me, but a lot of people were so pissed about the OJ thing.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not saying, I mean, understandably, whatever, but like they were pissed. And so like there was just no sympathy for the Menendez brothers on
Yeah.
that second trial. And so, basically what happened with the second trial is that most of the sexual assault stuff wasn't allowed in.
Well,
Wasn't
that's why I assumed why there was no mitigating circumstances and there was no leniency was because none of the stuff that was said was like this. This is one of those cases that's I'm pretty staunch in my belief that I don't really believe in the death penalty. And this is one of those cases that kind of shows me why, not just that that such important evidence wasn't allowed to be shown, but what we've learned is that much of, the judicial system, though I do believe that what we have is about as close to the best thing that you can hope for, better. What's the saying? Better 10 guilty people go free than one innocent person spend a day in jail. A lot of people believe that. But to me, the idea here is that the state is still made up of individuals. And I have my own issues as anybody who watches our show. I will go off on my tangents about government and the corruption of government. But even if you're to take the word of the politicians who put these people into power, get these people elected, certainly your DAs, is that they're career-driven people that want to go places. They don't see that job as the be-all, end-all. They've got further ambitions, and when ambition plays a part of it, it's very, very hard to believe that corners don't get cut. Evidence. Look at what happened with Alec Baldwin and the evidence that was mishandled that eventually led to him getting off, right? So I have a very hard time, believing that the death penalty is something that we should consciously go for in America when I don't trust the system that employs it to do so.
Right. If we knew that it was always 100% going to be correctly applied, that's a whole other argument.
If we're talking, there's video evidence of this person committing that crime, because that's the direction we're going in society right now. Is nobody is going to believe anything unless there is a video evidence of that, and even then, it almost doesn't matter anymore because AI deepfakes have become so good as well that someday it just feels like we don't even live in any form of perceivable reality anymore. And the law is one of the things that suffers.
Well, and it's, this is something that if you look at the famous philosopher Baudrillard from decades ago, this French guy, but he was really interested in media. He's referenced in The Matrix. So I always tell people that when I'm bringing him up, but he predicted that we would slowly go from a situation, and this was decades ago, he's writing about this, but we would go from a situation where at least we would still have we'd still have video, we'd still have photographs that we could depend on, et cetera, to a situation where he predicted we would just be completely unmoored from any vestige of reality. He said we would just be like in a sea of floating symbols, right? And images and things just detached from their points of reference.
He's not wrong. That's if you want to take it on a macro level, that's what I feel like most of what social media is now. I'm divorced from whether any of it is true or not, because I know that every account, especially if we're talking about something, societally important, whether we're talking
where the stakes are high,
where the stakes are high, everyone has a motive and a reason, even if the video is real, to frame something in a certain way. I mean, this goes back decades beyond that, but the best examples are look at protest footage, right? So you see the video of a cop hitting a protester, but what you don't see is the protester, pushing the cop.
Or the Covington Catholic thing. That was a great example.
Stuff. And that's all not even including what we're talking about here, which is manipulated video, edited video. As we spend more and more of our lives behind computers and looking through phone screens, it's going to be harder and harder to actually nail down what our reality is, because I feel like there is just this disconnect and this inability to really feel tethered to reality when you're trying to focus on things that matter.
Absolutely true. So depressing. No,
Yes, it
it's
is.
okay. No, I just did a live stream like a few days ago about why, I think it's important to talk about depressing stuff,
Got to
so
do it.
I appreciate the realism there. Are you still good? Do you need to go?
Yeah, I'm gonna
You
get
need to say
going
au
here, guys.
revoir. Au revoir.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're in the chat, thank you guys, and thank you, Kurtz, for having me on again.
And we will have you on again in maybe like happier circumstances.
Well, yeah, like, if you would let me know when you're doing
I
this,
want to talk about the Joker too.
I would have talked about that. We'll do that
next
We'll
time.
save that for next time. We'll talk
Next
about
time.
Joker.
Okay, sounds good. All right, good luck with everything. Talk to you soon.
Later. Bye, guys.
All right, bye-bye. And I'm removing. And he left. He removed himself. So, everybody, I got 39 of you. So most of you, everybody stuck around. We added a few. So let me tell you a little bit. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you a bit about my evolution, my journey on the Menendez thing, and I'm going to tell you actually something about myself here. And this is some stuff that I just allude to vaguely sometimes about my childhood, my background, but it does really connect to the Menendez stuff and why I've been fascinated with it for so long, off and on. So in 1989, when these guys killed their parents, I was 9 years old. And then this was in the news then for several years in the early 90s with both trials. The first one that they got the hung jury, and then the second one where they were convicted. And I know some of you can relate to this. From a very young age, I was just fascinated with current events and with the news and stuff. And I don't know if that's precociousness or it's just, I don't know, just watching a lot of TV, watching too much TV, being allowed to watch too much TV. You hear me, Mom? No. My mom is perhaps watching this. I sent her a link because she said that she had told me she has a hard time keeping track of when my shows are, because like YouTube doesn't show her very much, right, on the algorithm. So I sent her a link, and anyway, so she may or may not be watching. But yeah, I was fascinated with current events from a very young age. And when I was like 4 or 5 years old, I was worried about AIDS because that was all over the news then, right? And it's like things like that. I was just obsessed with like even then, like the news and dark stuff. But I was really into even at that age, like true crime. And so when the O.J. Simpson thing happened, I was a few years older, that was what, 90, is that 92 or something? So like maybe 12, but 12, 13, maybe 14. I don't know. It lasted so long, right? The trial itself was a year. But listen to how dorky I was. I would get a VHS tape because this was still back in the days of the old school VHS tape recorders. And so I would get a VHS tape and I would record an entire day of O.J. Simpson trial footage from court TV mostly. And remember, CNN was basically all day. Those of you who remember this, CNN during that trial was basically all day OJ coverage, more or less. And so while I was at school, right, I would tape record a full day of coverage. And then I would come home. This is how dorky and ridiculous I was at that age. Even at that age, I would come home and I would watch. I would have to fast forward through some of it, right? But I would watch all day's OJ Simpson trial footage. I don't know. I just think that's so funny and ridiculous looking back on it now. But let me get to the point. Michael Brown, hello. I don't know why you just popped up there, but it's good to see you. I see you, I think, on almost all of my live streams, and I really appreciate you. I don't have mods, by the way, tonight, not because they refuse to, but because I didn't let them know, because I really like to give them some time off, particularly for stuff like this. The stakes are not very high. This is not like one of my big Marilyn Manson shows. But anyway, get to the point. So I was really interested in this Menendez stuff. I think because when I was young, I just thought that there was an element of thinking they were really cute. I mean, admittedly, like we do have to, I think, ladies, those of us who are interested in this, I do think there's a certain degree to which we have to admit that like the attractiveness, or of course now I don't know so much what they look like, but the attractiveness of how they were sort of frozen in time, immortalized as these young well-dressed, kind of chic, attractive men. I think that there's definitely always some element of that, right? I mean, people, and the same thing with men, I think having more sympathy sometimes for women who are more attractive or present as being more attractive, right? There's just there's a biological thing going on definitely there underneath. But certainly when I was, a young girl, I was interested in the celebrity news aspect of it, and the salacious aspect, and then also I thought they were cute, and I was wanting at that point to be a lawyer one day, so I was super interested in Leslie Abramson and what she was doing in the courtroom and the success that she had in that first trial. Anyway, so but I have to say also that, and this is, I think, is why this case really resonates with a lot of us, is that I think that there are a lot of us who experienced varying degrees of abuse growing up from one or both parents. And I think that there are a number of us who look at Jose Menendez, who look at a character like like that father, Jose Menendez, and even if we can't relate to all aspects of that character, I was never sexually abused, physically, hit or anything like that. Right? My dad was very emotionally abusive. He was very sadistic in a number of ways, emotionally scary to me as a kid, et cetera, et cetera. Narcissistic, classic NPD, right? And I think that, and my mom was not at all like Kitty Menendez, but she was very cowed by him in a number of ways. And she was struggling to hold the family together under difficult circumstances and do what was best for us. And so I think when I was young, it appeared to me at the time that she was not standing up for us and standing up to my dad in the way that I thought she should. But as I've gotten older, what I've seen is that there were a lot of different considerations she had for our well-being, and she was trying to juggle a lot, and that she was handling things as best she could, right? And so I think that there are a number of us who can relate to this feeling when we are young of being trapped with our parents, even and perhaps even in situations where we had good relationships with our parents or you had good parents, still this feeling of sort of being at the mercy of when you're not an adult, of the mercy of someone else's ideas and rules and idiosyncrasies, and sometimes they're flaws, they're human flaws, and and maybe more anger, abuse, that sort of thing, right? And so I think that, again, this discordance between this appearance of being this perfect family and wealthy in the American dream, and they were all attractive, et cetera, successful, and that discordance between the reality, what was hidden underneath and maybe not so hidden, right, but this other really, really dark side with abuse and fear and all of that. I think that there are a number of us who actually, we get that, we understand that, and we are all dealing, or not all, but a lot of us are dealing with our own psychological wounds in various ways. Now, does that mean that like we would be justified in harming our parents, or that that's something that should be celebrated or anything? No, 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 not at all. But I think that people, in a visceral way, a number of us can relate to feel those feelings of being trapped, of feeling angry. I know I've had dreams before of beating my dad up. I never was able to express anger to him when he was abusive, or even in the years after. And then when he got dementia, at that point, he became, in my mind, just kind of this like sort of pitiful, this object of pity. And I didn't have anger, conscious anger at him that needed to be expressed. But I have had off and on for years dreams, I guess you could say fantasies, dreams of beating him up, right? Where in my dreams, I'm dreaming that he's like the way he used to be, scary and angry and all of that I remember in a negative way, right? And then I'm yelling at him and I'm beating him up. And I think that there is something that, even though we don't condone what happened to the parents, and we don't think that it's okay or should be celebrated or anything like that, and some people might even think that these guys should be put away in prison for the rest of their lives for it. I do think that there's an extent to which also, whether we want to admit it or not, we can sort of, in a way, just in a slight way, relate to maybe a sliver of that emotion and that dynamic. I don't know. Something cheerful to think about. No. But so anyway, I'm gonna, if you want to stick around with me, you can. I was not expecting to do more than, honestly, like an hour and a half, but I actually talk about this more, and then we could get into some other things. I can talk too in a little while about the latest with the boy with leukemia. There's stuff going on there, and sort of the latest with Manson's stuff. We can talk about the DA and what's been going on with that. So maybe I'll take a break, and then I'll come back and show you some scenes from some different Menendez stuff, maybe for like another 20, 30 minutes. And then I'll talk about other things, Manson and stuff like that, if you want. So I think I can do another hour if you want. Okay. But you got to let me take breaks, because I have to do that. But I will be back, and I'm going to maybe come back with a snack too. All right, so be back.
unusual. You had some unusual experiences as a kid that I hope are unlike what most of us go through. And you start the book with a line which is very striking. Hell, to me, was my grandfather's cellar. Now tell me about your grandfather, because that's very traumatic stuff.
Well, I got exposed to sex and pornography at an early age, but everybody seems to be more shocked at it by the way that I am. I think it made
but
me
your
grow
grandfather
up to
did
be
shocking things. He was into bestiality. He was into, serious hardcore pornography. And as a child, you stumbled upon this in the basement. That's a very traumatic thing for a child.
As a kid, I think I looked at him the way that my family probably still looks at him, as an aberration, as a freak, something that doesn't make sense. But after writing the book and experiencing what I've gone through over the past few years, the way that the world looks at me, I think now I have more in common with my grandfather than with anyone else, because I'm treated the same way. And
but in many ways, you've become your grandfather, haven't you?
In some ways. And I don't see him as the monster that I used to see him. I see him as someone who's misunderstood.
But as a child, you were traumatized, and you have to admit that. You were traumatized by seeing that sort of thing.
It definitely shaped my opinion on sex and pornography and how I look at things. And
how do you feel about sex?
Well, it depends. I'm more conservative than most people think.
I had been away from the news, and the day we got back, I picked up the LA Times and I read, oh my God, the Menendez, Kitty and Jose, they were my clients. Oh my God, what happened?
You know, it doesn't happen. And not that kind of murder. I mean, 2 people blown away in their den.
I turned on the television and broadcast or whatever says, rich Beverly Hills couple shot to death. And I turned around to my roommate and I said, that's the Menendezes, and the kids shot him.
What made you say that?
I don't know. Weird feeling, night before, being so weird.
When I first heard that Kitty and Jose had been killed, it never crossed my mind that it could have been the boys. It never occurred to me that they would do that, because I had known them for those years as nice, loving, gentle boys.
At the time, they thought it was like a mafia hit or something, because it was so gruesome.
There's a line in the article quoting me saying, I sincerely believe when we find out what really happened, we will all be embarrassed to learn it is to do with some bizarre aspect of Jose's personal life.
Right. The whole scene was shocking. I mean, the bodies of the victims had numerous gunshot blasts to them.
So this is an A&E, hope you can hear me. Hello, everybody. So this is an A&E multi-episode special that came out several years ago, and it was entitled something like Eric Menendez Speaks, Tells All, something like that, because it was a collection of phone calls from prison interviews that the younger Mendez brother did, and they put it together in this documentary series. And then they interviewed a lot of people who had never spoken out before. And some of the people interviewed were associates of Jose Menendez. And so this guy that they were just interviewing here, he said, I predicted at the time that it would come out basically some embarrassing or horrific or shameful aspect of this guy's private life, that this will have been the cause or linked to it. And of course, that ended up being the case, right? To some degree, depending on who you believe. And so anyway, but the crime scene, it was really gruesome. You can see it here. And it, and the mom was on the floor. She was crawling. She was, fighting for her life, so to speak. And one of them did go back and reload and come back and kill her. So, I have to acknowledge it's truly a brutal killing. I think, again, though, those of us then who think about the years of brutality that we believe were inflicted on these guys going back to when they were very young children, like 6 years old for one of them, I believe. Again, if you believe it, it makes sense. It makes sense how that could have produced really fucked up, dysfunctional, angry, aggressive kids who, whatever their reasons, were acting out in this way. So I don't know, but again, 35 years, long time to be in prison in this kind of a situation. So I saw Michael Brown. I saw your comment about Joker. We can get into talking about some of that a little bit. I wanted to kind of throw though something out to those of you who are Marilyn Manson fans. Before I wanted to say, I want to say some more about the Menendez brothers, and I want to look at a couple of clips from some different things related to that. But I've got a lot of Marilyn Manson fans in the audience and among you, and I wanted to talk a bit here, take a little bit of a detour. And talk a bit about something that really has always fascinated me about Manson's art, and about, in particular, about that semi-autobiographical book, The Long Hard Road Out of Hell. And here's the question. Here's the thing. Here, let me take this. First of all, let me take this really graphic and horrible image off. That's funny. I did not consciously intend to stop there. So I got a question. Let me reframe this. I got a question, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago from somebody in the comment section on one of the posts that I did on Instagram. And this person asked, something to the effect of, you used to be an English professor or English instructor in college, and you taught intro to lit, or you taught literature courses, you taught film courses, et cetera, right? And they asked me this question. They said, if you were teaching a course on Marilyn Manson, the artist, what would you talk about? And I thought that was something, I hadn't considered. And it's really interesting. And I'm not going to impose a series of academic lectures about Marilyn Manson on you. But it got me to thinking, like, what are the aspects? And there's so much about his art, as you know, that I don't know. And I'm such a novice. And I've been, for the last 4 years, focused almost exclusively on the shit that he's been in with the Me Too hoax and all of that. And really still, until recently, not taking much of a look at his art, honestly, beyond debunking that supposed autobiography, right? Which, as we know, had a lot of fictional stuff in it, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I had not considered, honestly, until recently, his art very much. And so this question that somebody raised in this comment, it got me to thinking. And I guess that here's where I want to then to come to you and throw it back at you as Manson fans and people who've followed his work much more than I have. When someone writes a book, and I understand that there was also a ghostwriter involved. And again, it was a lot of fictional elements. But I do think that Manson was the guiding mind and the ultimate craftsman for that book, and including the fictional stuff, right? But here's my question. Manson more or less wrote that book, right? And I have always, as a professor teaching literature and film, I've always said that when you are analyzing a work like that, you want to pay special attention to how it begins and how it ends. Because generally speaking, a writer, a director, what have you, they will emphasize their most important themes in some way at the beginning and at the end. You want to start off in a really powerful way when you're writing or you're making a film or something, and you want to front load often some of your ideas there at the beginning, right? And so here's my question. Manson's book, The Long Hard Road Out of Hell, it begins with his grandfather's basement. There's that line, right? Something to the effect of, for me, hell, and I'm paraphrasing, but for me, hell was my grandfather's basement, something like that. It begins with his grandfather's basement and this story about, he and his friend sneaking down to the basement sometimes, right, to basically gawk at, and sort of in horror, but also fascination, I think, his grandfather jerking off to all kinds of like really distasteful or problematic porn, including bestiality, right? And also there was a reference to a train set, because down in this basement, I guess he was living with the family, right? As I'm understanding it. Or was it, someone remind me, was the grandfather living with Manson's parents, with his family, or did he have a separate house that had this basement? But anyway, regardless, you can let me know in the comments. Michael Brown, that seems like something you would know. Let me know in the comments. But, and I'm sorry if this is offensive to people too, but we're talking about getting real tonight about some of this stuff tonight. And so anyway, but he starts his book with this story, and it wasn't just like a sort of a throwaway story at the beginning. Like it's a real subject of interest at the beginning of this book, and he talks about it at some length, as you know, if you've read this book, right? Manson does. He talks about this scenario, and with like, and the stuff that they found in the grandfather's basement, and the kind of, weird, disturbing porn that he was into. And also the idea that he would jerk off over this train set, and of course a train set symbolizes innocence, right? Childhood innocence. And the grandfather had some kind of a problem, right? I don't know if it was cancer. I can't really remember, right? But he had some kind of a problem where he had, the hole in his throat. And so there's this like long description too of like when he was jerking off, like he would also, something to do with the hole in his throat, right? Somebody help me out. I didn't read it over and over, despite the fact that I find it interesting, but I just didn't really feel like rereading that part of the book. But here's my question to you. And this is a question I would ask if I were teaching this in a college course. It's generally very significant the way that someone starts a work of art, be it a book or be it a film. And my question is, what was Manson getting at in starting his fictionalized autobiography, but in starting this narrative about himself, and he's constructing the character of Marilyn Manson right through this book, at least in part. Why did he start there in the basement with his grandfather doing this weird shit and jerking off to weird porn? I mean, what was up with all that? What was up with that? And I am not like, unlike this interview that we just saw, I'm not trying to get at this idea of like, did it do something weird to Manson? Because, he says at the end of the interview that he's actually surprisingly very conservative in his sexuality. And if you watch my channel, I've interviewed ex-girlfriends, ex-lovers, and so forth, people who know. And he's very sexually not into kink and stuff like that, right? So I'm not trying to get at this idea of like, there was something, watching his granddad jerking off in the basement, there was some way like it messed up his sexuality. I'm interested in, as an artist, as a writer, why start there? What was he getting at there? Even maybe on an unconscious or semi-conscious level. What is up with that? And so I'd be curious, some of you, to hear what you have to read, what you have to think on that. But let me just say one thing. There was a classic work of literature in the, there was a classic work of literature called Jane Eyre that some of you might have read. A lot of people are familiar with Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, or they've heard of it. And I think there's a film now being made of it. But I'm talking about her sister and this book called Jane Eyre, this romantic book about this governess, this young innocent governess who falls in love with an older man, et cetera, okay? And it's like, now, when you get older, you look at it, it's kind of silly in a number of ways. But it is, in a lot of ways, it's a beautifully written book and very romantic. And I loved it when I was younger. But let me get to something here. And you're like, what the hell? She's rambling so much. No, I have a point. In this book, this lady falls in love with this guy, and they're about to get married. And all of a sudden, sorry, spoiler, she finds out that he already has a wife, and that this wife he keeps chained up in the attic because she's crazy. And so again, this is like, we're talking about hundreds of years ago, Europe. They didn't have, the sort of enlightened ideas that we have now about mental illness and such. And so the idea was that he married this lady. He didn't really know her. Turns out she was crazy and violent. And so he had to hire a nurse to watch her and keep her chained up in the attic. And so basically it was this secret, this mad woman in the attic. And that's like the big like shock of the story, right? Because this lady, Jane Eyre, she's in love with this guy. She thinks it's going to be perfect. He's rich. He's older. He's established. He's fascinating. He's so intelligent, so quick-witted, dashing, blah, 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 blah. And, but there's this problem. He's got this crazy wife chained up in the attic, right? So here's the thing. A number of professors, literary scholars have looked at this story and have said, is the mad woman in the attic a kind of a metaphor for the repression that the main character feels in the story as she's constantly, and this like a very feminist analysis, right? But as the main character is constantly having to repress herself in various ways. And sometimes she'll talk about it. She'll say, oh, I wish I could have adventure. I wish I could do what men do, et cetera, right? But she feels very repressed and so forth. Now, here's my point. If we want to look at the idea of shutting part of oneself away, like in an attic, if we want to see the idea of location as being kind of a metaphor for the part of the mind that we repress or we shut away, or that's horrifying, or that we can't deal with, right? I think about kind of like the mad woman in the attic, the idea of the grandfather in the basement in the Manson story, in the Manson narrative, as the basement is like this like location, like it's because it's beneath, right? And so there's the idea of something that's already beneath, like the world that the rest of the people who would see. You come over and you visit, you probably don't go into the basement. Oh, that's grandpa's area. That's where grandpa lives. Don't go in the basement. Don't go in the basement, right? You're discouraged from going in the basement. Visitors come over, they're not going to go to the basement, right? That's grandfather's realm, right? But meanwhile, what's going on in the basement in grandfather's realm is some like, I mean, I'm not trying to be like a, judgmental, but like some kind of disturbing, unsettling, kinky shit, maybe worse than that. I don't know, depending on your perspective, it's not something that a kid can really integrate or deal with. And so I think that what's going on with that story having such a place of prominence in Manson's, either his personal narrative or the way that he chooses to think about his narrative that he's presenting to the world in that fictionalized autobiography, is this idea of something beneath the seemingly normal, safe world, something beneath that, something that cannot be, that is too weird, too unsettling, too horrific. It cannot be integrated into that other realm, that other reality. And so even we see this even in the name that he chose for the band, Marilyn Manson. And I've talked about this before, but he chose a name, a combination that would evoke a really profound, and he's talked about this, right? A really profound dichotomy of two things that are always in a kind of a tension with each other that cannot be totally reconciled. And that's why it's so interesting and people respond so much to the name on such a visceral level. I mean, I don't know if you take the name Marilyn Manson away from Marilyn Manson, it's kind of like a rose by any other name. Is it going to be as sweet? But seriously, if you take that away, I wonder if he would have been, even with the great art and music and all of that and the pageantry, I wonder if he would have been nearly as successful without that name, because of what it evokes. And so you see that, I think, with the idea of the grandfather he's like shut, kind of like the mad woman shut in the attic, can't deal with her, just shut her out, but she's still there. Like she still is making noise and she's threatening. And sometimes she comes down in the story and she sets people on fire and stuff like that. The grandfather in the basement and what that represented to Manson growing up, or at least as he describes it in the book, I think that's really something interesting. And, if you go back and you read that, the imagery with him leaning over, I'm sorry, I'm like actually like acting it out now, I don't know about that, but the grandfather like leaning over like the train set, right? And he's got like the thing in his throat, and then I guess like he's looking at the magazine, he's like jerking off. There's a lot going on actually. The grandfather is pretty like active actually in this scenario. I'm sorry. I don't know if I should be laughing. And I just realized that this came out. Hold on a second. If you wonder why the sound got worse, here we go. Can you hear me? Sorry, I was so into my story there in my lecture about Manson and the grandfather that I completely didn't notice that the headphones had come out. But anyway, y'all, but seriously, I don't want to ramble anymore about this. And I know some people hate when I get into this professorly mode, but one of you did ask the question and you wanted to know what would I talk about? And that's what I would talk about that's what I would ask him also if I were interviewing him. I would say, what is up with the explain to me the place of significance in your book and that narrative of the grandfather in the basement. I think that's really interesting. But I do think that's what it evokes. So roundabout way, getting back to the Menendez brothers is the idea of that family portrait. And I talked about this a bit on Instagram and in other videos, but the idea of the fact that Jose dragged his kids in the middle of all the problems that they were having and the brushes with the law they were having and the sort of the breakdown of the family and all the craziness. And he drags them to Sears to take a family portrait. And that Menendez family portrait that was taken really only months right before he and his wife would be gunned down. That is like the height of irony there. The notion of this appearance that they're trying to project to the world of that which is seen, that part of the iceberg that is visible, right? But beneath that, a completely different, discordant situation, right? The lower half of the iceberg, the thing you don't see, the grandfather in the basement, the mad woman in the attic, that which cannot be totally integrated. And what Brett was saying earlier when he was on here about media, I think is so smart in the sense that he was talking about how we are so frequently now, we are just barraged by horrific images and horrific things in the nature of social media. We can't even necessarily trust it either, right? But the images that you see of it on Instagram and some of the war photography, I talked about this burning to death I saw recently. And we can't integrate it, right? And so I think that's another reason why people are so fascinated with the Menendez thing is because it does really give us that really sharp discordance there between differing realities. So I have a couple of scenes from the Netflix show I want to show you. Give me like 30 seconds to pop away and then pop back when I have it set up. And so we'll look at a few scenes and then move on.
It was a very strange case, unlike anything that we had seen in LA. It was the first case to bring out what I call America's dirty little secret of child sexual abuse in upper class families.
The big question is, do you believe him? I mean, I think people were really surprised by the defense in this case.
What mattered in the trial, I think the only thing that mattered was what happened that week that caused me to be so terrified that I could ever pull that trigger. And so to get there, to understand how I could think this, who's going to tell that story?
This family was living the American dream. But all of a sudden, this American dream was just a facade.
I have tried, but I can't remember one time when I ever saw Kitty and Jose hug each other. They would pose for pictures. They put on the airs of being this great, happy, well-together family. Inside, there was threatening, there was yelling. I lived with them for over a year. I couldn't take it anymore.
So I wished I never lived with them because I wouldn't have known that behind the doors scenario was going on in that house.
My bedroom was downstairs and there were 2 single beds, and Lyle came downstairs one night, it was before bedtime, and wanting to sleep in the other bed. And he said that he was afraid that his dad was going to come into his room that he and his dad had been touching each other down there, and he indicated his groin area. So I went to get Kitty and I told her what was going on. She didn't say anything. She just took him by the arm and took him back upstairs and took him back to his bedroom, and that was it. Kitty and Jose were like king and queen. And so it was just not in my head to second guess what they did.
What I experienced while living with them was kind of strange. One time I went into their room. I was talking with Lyle, and as I'm sitting on the bed, I'm looking, and under the bed is a Tupperware container. What the hell is that for? And Lyle then goes, "No, don't touch that. Oh, that's too late. I'm not gonna." I just went over and I grabbed it out, and to my dismay, it was a Tupperware container that had feces in it. And I looked over at him. I said, "What the is this?" He looked at me and he says, "Well, when I get nervous, I don't want to go take a bathroom or tell mom I have to go to the bathroom, so I just go to the bathroom and I close it up." I'm like, "What the
You learn don't talk about what goes on in this home. And the reason is that climate of secrecy, and these families often are isolated, so they don't have a sense of even what's normal.
The trauma that both of the brothers suffered not only involved verbal and psychological humiliation and hypercriticism. Eric told me it involved physical abuse at times, but there was something more going on as well.
Lyle and I had fought so hard to keep the secrets from coming out. When I was first molested, it was by Lyle.
There's a certain to a certain extent, right? Like, I don't want to, like, traumatize or depress people, y'all in the audience. Like, you can seek this stuff out and you can watch more of this. Like, the series is on A&E. But we're talking about, I just play a little of it because if it is true, which I think it is, again, based on like the family members standing by them for years and years and years, when it's not, there's no reason to, it's not convenient. Even family members of Jose and Kitty, right? And going back, witness testimony, going back years and years of various incidents where things like what you've just heard were reported and so forth. And then also there are medical records. I don't want to get into it, but there are medical records of years and years for these kids indicating some weird stuff going on. And I don't want to get specific because if I start to talk about the specifics of it, like it's really disturbing and stuff. But things that indicate the kind of abuse that I think they were experiencing as kids and teenagers. And so I do think that there's enough compelling evidence here, unlike in a number of other situations, right, that I've talked about on my show. And there's and really no evidence contradicting the Menendez brothers, except for the question, why didn't you tell people sooner? Why didn't you tell Jerome Oil, for example? Well, he was a really shady, sleazy psychologist who ended up betraying them and doing stupid shit. So why would they, first of all, trust that deepest, darkest, shameful secret to him? But, this question of why did they behave in the way that they did after they murdered their parents, buying expensive stuff, cars, Rolex watches. Why did they do seemingly weird, twisted things like Lyle Menendez wore his father's shoes at one point, after he killed him, wore his shoes around, things of that nature. And the way that the brothers explain it is that they were living in a state of psychological unreality and they were just basically grasping at anything that would make them feel better. And we could take that at face value and believe that, or we could say that maybe they were acting extremely monstrously at that point. But again, I think that it's pretty obvious that that was a direct result of what had been inflicted upon them by the people that they ended up killing. So again, I think it goes back to how many years in this situation with this context should these guys have to pay for this, right? So it's an interesting question there, and I don't, again, I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I wanted to talk about briefly what the hell has been going on with the DA Gascon, with his challenger, Nathan Hochman, and the Marilyn Manson situation. So here's a bit of a bridge here for those of you who don't know anything about Manson. You're coming to this video to watch this because you're interested in the Menendez case. Well, as you may or may not know, one of the reasons why the current DA of LA, Gascon, is promoting the Menendez situation is probably going to end up more or less getting them out by Christmas, I think. One of the main reasons why he's doing that is because he is in a race for re-election and he's 30 points behind his challenger. And so his challenger is this guy named Nathan Hochman. He's 30 points ahead in most polls of Gascon. And so I think what's going on here is that Gascon is looking for some high profile, low hanging fruit that he can say, okay, I did this. I got the Menendez brothers out, elect me, reelect me, right? And so, it's transparent, it's political, but I guess whatever works, and I'll be happy under any circumstances if they get to be released. But I am frustrated that Gascon has still not cleared Manson and that he is pretending like there's this new part of the investigation that he's opened up, when in fact he himself admitted in that Nightline interview that there's no new evidence. There was no new accuser. There's no new aspect to this narrative. It really is just a rehashing. And it was very strange behavior. I was like, what is Gascon doing? Why is he suddenly talking about this Manson thing out of nowhere and trying to sort of pretend that there's a new part of the investigation that he's now opening up? And then somebody told me something that really shocked me, that his challenger, Nathan Hochman, let me show you some pictures. Those of you who don't know what I'm talking about here. And by the way, I am going to say a few more things about the Menendez case, and I'm going to show you a couple of more things at the end of the stream. But I wanted to talk about this thing with Hochman and Manson a bit more because people have been asking me what is going on, because a lot of you might have seen the video that I posted on my channel, in which I was basically pleading with Hochman, the probable incoming DA, to reconsider. I'm sorry, this shaking. To reconsider the Manson situation. So let me show you what's this guy's picture. Okay, so here's the deal. Long story short, is that Nathan Hochman and Esme Bianco are basically, metaphorically speaking, politically, they were in bed together up until recently. I'm hoping that Nathan Hochman is reconsidering. But he did a rally, a political rally, an anti-Gascon rally a week ago with Esme Bianco, and she was one of the featured speakers. And this is one of Manson's accusers. It was the Game of Thrones lady, the burlesque dancer, the one who had the stupid pictures at the back with the head cut off so you couldn't see whose back it was. And she claimed they were whip marks, but in fact they were just light indentations from being tied up, and she's done a lot of like BDSM stuff and so forth, right? So like just this bizarre way out there set of claims. And she was the one who came to LA and lived with Manson for a month and then claimed that was a form of trafficking, even though even though it was a consensual romantic relationship. So here's the point. Nathan Hochman, Gascon's challenger, did a rally in which she was the featured speaker. This was like a week ago. And Nathan Hochman demanded that Gascon take action on the Manson case. And basically, Hochman seemed to be demanding that Manson be arrested, honestly. And so I was really shocked and disheartened by this, because I had held out hope that once Gascon was kicked out of office, that his challenger would have more sense than him, and particularly if he was more on the right wing, I think would be more immune. Someone who is more right wing or a Republican would be more immune, I think, to some of the Me Too ideology. And so I thought, okay, Gascon might be a lost cause, and he's not going to clear Manson, but maybe the new guy will. And so to see that the new guy was aligning himself so publicly with Esme Bianco, one of Manson's, other than Evan Rachel Wood, really one of Manson's main accusers. And she's someone that Ashley Morgan Smithline, when she came forward and said that the whole thing was a hoax and she'd been pressured to lie about Manson, she claimed that Esme Bianco, along with Evan Rachel Wood, was one of the primary instigators of that. So I was just shocked to see that Hochman was backing her. But here's the deal. I did that video. in which I pled with him to reconsider. And it wasn't just me, because there were a number of you on Instagram that were calling him out. And y'all, did you notice that he ended up taking that post with Esme Bianco that was on his Instagram? He ended up removing it. So I know that there's some stuff that was left on his website about that rally that he did with her and so forth. But or his staff, they deliberately removed, after my video and after there was some outcry among some of you on Instagram, they deliberately removed that post that was calling for the DA to deal with Manson, and that was promoting Esme Bianco and her claims. And so I'm just going to take that as a victory and an indication that hopefully the next DA, this incoming DA, he looked into it a little, or he had someone look into it enough to see that there might be some big problems here. And so I just really hope that once he gets into office, that Hochman will look into this, that he'll finally, once he's elected, he'll be able to talk to the cops, he'll be able to talk to the detectives, those who've handled this case. They're going to tell him the truth. Look, we searched this guy. We went through all of his stuff, all of his electronic devices. We interviewed all these witnesses, and it turns out this thing is a bunch of BS, just a hoax. And so I hope, I hope he's cleared, that Manson is cleared soon, really, because this has just been ridiculous. So the connection between the Manson thing and the Menendez thing is that there are a lot of political games being played right now, a lot of like Game of Thrones style. Speaking of Game of Thrones, a lot of political games being played in LA politics and the DA's race. And that has both positive and negative effects. So on the positive side, it's really helping the Menendez brothers. And I think that Gascon is going to have them basically set up, like I said, to be released by Christmas. And but then it's got a negative side, which is that no one seems to want to deal with Manson or deal with the truth and clear Manson and end this thing. And they seem to be basically, they're all held hostage. It's kind of like the Crucible, y'all. You've got all of these like guys in power who are held hostage by a bunch of hysterical, lying, manipulative, conniving, attention-seeking women, silly women. Like, it really is the Crucible. If you're familiar with that work of literature you had to read in high school or whatever, that's really what's going on. And it would be funny if it weren't so frustrating, and if you didn't have, in Manson's case, Brian Warner's case, a man whose life, or not his life, he's moving on, he's making art, but there's a certain amount of anxiety, I'm sure, at this thing not being closed, hanging over his head. Do the courageous thing, Gascon. You're already losing. Already losing. Let's get this one off the table, so to speak, and let this man move on with his life. It's a hoax. It's BS. Let's let this man move on, okay? The truth will set you free, LADA. The truth will set you free. All right. Lots of comments. Sorry, I have not been paying enough attention. I'm going to try to read through a few of these. First of all, I want to recognize and celebrate one of my mods, AJ. What is up? Oh, what was I on my own on that one? I wasn't keeping track of the conversation. What did I say that you cannot condone or agree with? But AJ is one of the OG fans and supporters of my channel and one of my mods. And thank you for showing up. I didn't want to tear you away for this sort of, incidental Menendez discussion, but appreciate you being here, everybody. We've been going almost 2 hours. This is kind of a long one for me. I'm not going to do a 24-hour. Can you believe I used to do that? Those 24-hour streams? Seriously. I can't. Not now that I have a real job, so to speak, and one where I'm often pretty exhausted. It's a good job. I like doing it. I really do, but it's exhausting. Serving, waitressing. But anyway, okay. I'm going to look at some comments. Sorry, I get distracted. DBG Luxie says, I have had these types of intrusive thoughts, but I deal with them outside of the real world, and that's how it should be. Yeah, no, I know. Like, I've read comments from a number of people like you who say, hey, yeah, a lot of us have been through abuse. A lot of us have been through terrible shit, and yet we didn't. Not only do we not off our parents, we didn't shotgun them to death and go back and reload and come back and shoot the mom. I mean, it's legitimate perspective. It really is. And it's possible that some of us are being too sentimental or what have you. And so I don't know. I know that some people say if these weren't attractive, boyish looking guys, or at least the way that we remember them, or the way they were when this happened, when they went through the trials, then they wouldn't be getting the sympathy that they get now. Well, I don't know, because that cuts both ways. Because yes, there's a certain amount of sympathy or empathy or what have you that maybe a number of people, women in particular, feel toward these guys. But then on the other hand, there's a lot of antipathy against them and suspicion because of the class, oh yeah, spoiled, rich, pampered, narcissistic, guys, kids, whatever. So I think that there's a lot that goes both ways. And they certainly, in that second trial and in the media, they got really, really blasted in a lot of ways. And like the SNL skit, I'm sure that a number of you have seen that. I posted some of that on my Instagram, but the way that the SNL skit just totally ridiculed Lyle crying on the stand about being, raped by his father, you look back at it now and you're like, man, but they were really, really, in a lot of ways, reviled and hated. And there were a lot of people who just thought there was no way that guys like this could be raped by their father. He seems to have been just an extremely, in a lot of ways, demented personality. Again, people describe him as Jose, I'm talking about the dad, as one of the worst people that they had known. The things that, if you want to look into it, that he did to his sons, like some stuff that is really like not only horrific, but like just like bizarre. I can say it that way. I don't know. It's a very like complex, I think really horrifying, unusual character there with Jose Menendez. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but there's a short clip of him that you can see online. Hold on one second. Be right back. I'm grabbing this clip of Jose, this real clip. You can see those of you who feel like you can read the appearance and body language of someone and you know who they really are, then you've got like 30 seconds here to use your skills, your craft here, and tell me what you think. I'm pulling it up. Okay. Good. All right, so here's Jose Menendez. He's just on a business program talking about his company, but see, just a second. See what you can see in this, insights you can give us. Come on. Here we go. Okay.
Jose Menendez is chairman of the board, president, and chief executive officer of Live Entertainment, joining us here in Los Angeles. And I should point out, this is the company, folks, that brings you the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles video, which seriously is a hot video right now.
It is. So the company is broad-based and it provides pretty much what the consumer wants.
Mm-hmm. And you must have projections for down the road what you're expecting to make at some point.
So we think 1989 will be a tremendous year.
I'm sorry, 1989, it's going to be a tremendous year. Oh, no. Oh, no. If only he knew. Hold on. Let me bring you can see me. All right, one more time. I want to point out something, y'all. Okay, this may just be me being stupid, but let me tell you something. Most of the time, I feel like most of the time, when someone turns out to be a bad person, when you look up a video of them, like you'll say, well, maybe underneath they really are, but they make a good impression, or they seem really charming, or they seem harmless, And so, but in this case, when I look at this guy and I look at just this superficial interview about, his company and stuff, I can like see, maybe I'm projecting, but I feel like I can see and hear the menace underneath. I don't know. One more time. Let's look at it one more time. Tell me.
Jose Menendez is chairman.
Do you detect it? All right.
Jose Menendez is chairman of the board, president, and chief executive officer of Live Entertainment, joining us here in Los Angeles. And I should point out, this is the company, folks, that brings you the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles video, which seriously is a hot video right now.
It is. So the company is broad-based and it provides pretty much what the consumer.
Dude, I don't know. Those eyes, they're just so intense. I don't know. I'm just getting a menacing feeling.
Mm-hmm. And you must have projections for down the road what you're expecting to make at some point.
So we think 1989 will be a tremendous year.
I don't know. Am I projecting? Yes or no? But yeah, there he is predicting a great 1989. All right. What else? Other comments? What other comments? DBG says, AJ, it would be nice if it could just stay in the fantasy world, but the human animal is a beautiful and terrible creature capable of kindness and also unfathomable cruelty. That is definitely true. I'll agree with that. He can't even get a grand jury indictment. Are you talking about? Yeah, nobody. I mean, I don't think that. Talking about Manson now. I think right. I don't think that anyone who's investigated this thinks that it's serious. I mean, I've talked to people that the detectives have interviewed in this situation, and they got the distinct impression that the detectives felt like they were wasting their time and that it was BS. Like they didn't say it outright, but just kind of their attitude and some of the questions they asked and so forth. Like I think Gascon knows the truth. He's just sitting on it because he feels like it's politically bad news for him to clear Manson and make some feminist supporters of his mad. It's really unfortunate. Okay, Charlie Stevenson said Esme knows how to get more bang for her buck. Well, she settled with him. I wish that she, as a part of the settlement, she would have had to, it's just me personally, would have had to have signed an NDA or something, but then she said, "Oh, I'm being silenced. I'm silenced by my NDA." Those 24-hour streams were awesome. Yeah, they were. I might take some time off in the spring and get back to doing more of that. Right now, I'm trying to take advantage of the holiday season in this restaurant I'm at. They do really well. They do seriously in the holiday season with like parties and stuff like that. But anyway, Jose, so Elvira Ferrer says Jose looked creepy, too intense. Yeah, I could sense something unsettling underneath. I seriously could. I don't know. Okay, so we have been at this now 2 hours. Seriously, 2 hours. What do you think? What do y'all want me to talk about? I don't mind going longer if you want. We've still got 35 people hanging on. Are you tired? Is it a Monday night? Are you ready to go? What do you want to talk about? Tell me in the chat. What do you want to hear about? Talk about? I talked about the Manson stuff. I talked about the Menendez stuff. I talked about the DA and that whole situation. Anything? Oh, Kamala Harris. I hate to disappoint people, but I am so not plugged into the political stuff going on right now. I know that's like almost kind of ignorant and like it's almost kind of wrong, I guess. Like I know I'm supposed to be paying attention, but I'm just really not. And so, I mean, I've talked about before on my show how I'm more right of center, but there's also things that I'm pretty hardcore left wing about, like the abortion thing, and some other stuff. But Kamala, I've seen like clips of her floating around where she seems like a fucking idiot, but then I see clips floating around, obviously, of Trump where he seems like a fucking idiot too, and all. So I know it can all be selectively edited, but I think that her policies, I think, are too left wing, probably generally for me. And so again, if I had to vote, like a gun to my head, and I just had to choose, I guess I would choose Trump, but I'm probably not going to vote. And that's not a good thing. It's like lazy. I don't know. Y'all. What do you think? Am I a bad person for not voting? Probably not going to vote. But that's what I think about her. I'll tell you something, though, that you might find a little more interesting. Here's a debate that I can weigh in on with Kamala Harris. I think that she is a physically attractive lady, particularly for her age. But my guy, my significant other, he thinks she is just disgusting to look at. And so when I say that, he looks at me like I've said the craziest thing. So then I put a poll on my Instagram. Some of you might have seen this. I did a poll on my Instagram and Twitter asking, do you find Kamala Harris physically attractive, sexy, whatever term you want to use? And I thought more people would say yes, but like some did, but most people are like no. So I guess I'm seeing something in her that other people are not seeing, because I think she is a physically attractive lady. So I don't know. So I guess that answers your question. I don't have much to say about her politically, but I do think that she's more attractive than your average politician. I will say that. But no, I would, if I had to, I'd vote for Trump. But I think we're so fucked. I don't know, y'all. I do think we are pretty fucked. Maybe not this year or next year or next 5 years, but I do think the overall trajectory is not great. And I think we're broken. I mean, y'all know this. We all know this. We're so many things about our country, our government, et cetera, broken. So I don't know, but I talk a lot on my Twitter and Instagram about the national debt. And I feel like when you bring that up, like people, like that's one thing a lot of people are like, it's not even on their radar. They're like, yeah, we've got a debt, but that's not a real problem, right? Like that's not a real problem, like illegal immigration or this or that or whatever people are into, right? That really pushes their buttons. But it's like, it is really crazy, I think, how the debt has grown in such a short period of time since the Great Recession of 2008, and that's when things really got kicked off. I'm not about to go into an economics lesson, so don't worry, but I'm just saying that we are seriously, if you're younger and you don't realize this, we are in an abnormal period with the debt stuff. And it has not always grown this fast. In fact, there was a period of time, some of you remember in the Clinton years briefly, when Clinton basically teamed up with Newt Gingrich and some on the right to not only balance the budget for what, 1 or 2 years or something, but also create a surplus. And so there was a period where we didn't actually have a deficit. We still had a debt, but we didn't have a deficit for like what, a year or two under Clinton and the Republican regime. Like those days are long fucking gone. And it doesn't seem to really matter who's president, because when it's a Democrat, the debt gets run up, and when it's Republican, the debt gets run up. And so it just seems like nobody can say no. And that is one of the weaknesses of democracy, is that when your vote is tied to making the voters happy, obviously human nature is no one wants to give up money or stuff. I mean, I don't either, right? Nobody wants to. Nobody, but we are headed in some kind of terrible wrong direction with this, and it really has gotten just crazy. So the question is, how much longer can we continue to live in this crazy world with exploding debt before it has eventually some kind of um, real consequence, right? Because already the interest is huge now. There's a significant portion of tax revenue that's going just toward interest. So I don't know. That's all I'm going to say about it. But I guess, you bring up Kamala Harris, and it makes me think about politics, and it makes me think about the fact that I actually think one of our biggest boogeymen on the horizon is something that nobody has the balls to touch. Anyway, Lyle Michael says, do you think a lot of it has to do with funding wars? I mean, I don't want to sound like an ignorant person like Sarah Palin in the interview where she had no idea what the guy was talking about. Oh, he asked her he said, do you agree with the Bush doctrine? And she was like, in what respect, Charlie? Because she had no fucking idea what he was talking about. And so she was trying to kind of stall. When you say funding wars, you just mean like it's just so difficult in Congress for them to agree on a budget? Or are you talking about something specific that I'm ignorant, don't know about? But yeah, it seems like our government is broken, and it's almost impossible for them to collaborate on productive legislation. So I don't know. DBG says, I just wish politics would quit dealing with shit that is none of their concern and deal with the real issues. Yeah, I think probably most of us could agree with that. I think there's a lot, I'll tell you this, I think there's actually a lot more common ground among people than there is in the media and among our representatives. I think that there are a lot of things that people on both sides, normal people on both sides of the aisle, could agree on and want to get reformed. But I don't know. All right, if any of you want to stick around, I guess for one more half an hour, and think I can do that. And so I do need to feed my cats. My cats, I've got 2 kitties, and they get a late night treat. And unfortunately, we have a scavenger next door who, even though I think it is fed, it likes to come over and bully one of the cats into giving up its place, giving up its food. So when I feed the cats, I have to stand out there for a few minutes and make sure that one of them doesn't get bullied away from the food. But I'll come back if you want to stick around, if you want to talk about more stuff, different things. You could, if you think about some stuff, put it on the list, and I'll come back and look in a minute. But whatever, I can talk for another half an hour. So I'll be back, and I'll try to keep it down to like 5 minutes. Another break, and I'll come back. All right, I'm back. I decided to get more comfortable. So, what did you think, if I can ask kind of a weird question, what did you think about what I was wearing earlier? Because I had a kind of a silly debate with my significant other about it, because he said he thought it looked old-fashioned. A little old-fashioned with the lace, and I was like, "No, I don't think so." I said, "I think it kinda looks, some of, like, my Manson fans who like kind of the darker, sort of, slightly sensual, feminine aesthetic, right? With the black lace, and then you had, like, the flowers, but I don't know. So, you tell me. You won't hurt my feelings. Did it look kind of old-fashioned? I don't care. I totally don't care. I don't care. I'm just curious, though. He wasn't trying to be negative, like, he was trying to help, but he was just, genuinely, I guess, thought it looks kind of old-fashioned. It's funny. So, let me look at your questions, if you have any. Glenn Dwyer says, for instance, in Australia, they flood the country with immigrants because it drives up the cost of housing. Great for property owners and politicians pandering to property owners. It does seem like, if I could sort of say something sort of connected to the point you're making, it does seem like a lot more people are on board these days with concerns about, let's say, like unregulated or inadequately regulated immigration. And it used to be something that it used to be a situation, I think, I mean, not too long ago, where if you voiced concerns about immigration, then people just called you a racist and said you were automatically a racist. And I always thought that was really unfair. And so I do think that a lot of people have come around on that, whether or not they agree that it's a big problem or what should be done, but at least conceding that it doesn't mean, if you're concerned about immigration, it doesn't automatically mean that you're a racist, right? That was just always a stupid, reductive way of, incorrect way of looking at the situation, I think. But anyway, I don't know. I didn't see your conversation, Glenn, what you're responding to, but that did make me think about that. Thank you. I'll show him that. You thought I looked beautiful. I have him come in here. I said, "Come in here and look at this. Look at this comment." It's okay, Michael Brown. Probably the best answer, actually. The safest answer in many respects these days, especially for you men at work. If a woman asked you something she wore, did she look attractive or, God forbid, sexy? Just say you didn't notice. Okay. All right. So anyway, what else could I talk about? So the boy with leukemia, he pled out. So he got a 40. I don't think it was reported in the papers or anything, but I've seen communications with the DA and stuff, and so forth, and I'm sure it'll be entered into record at some point soon if it hasn't already been. But the boy who faked, the 24-year-old boyish looking guy who faked leukemia and other disabilities and being crippled and mute and stuff to meet Marilyn Manson at a concert. He had also, as it turns out, you'll remember, he had killed his older husband, his 58-year-old husband. And so he was awaiting trial for that. But he pled out. So he got a 40-year manslaughter sentence, but it was basically suspended down to, or reduced down to, 4 years. The rest will be served on probation or parole or whatever. So he'll have 36 years of parole and regular reporting and monitoring, but 4 years in prison. And I don't know if he serves that full sentence or that'll get reduced down to 2 years with good behavior or whatever. So I don't know, y'all. A manslaughter sentence, speaking of the Menendez brothers, to me, it indicates that there were probably certain mitigating factors with that. I know that some people had reported that this hoaxer, Miles Phillips, that he had claimed that he was in an abusive relationship and that his husband was extremely abusive, but he told so many lies. Apparently, he was like a talented Mr. Ripley type character that it was hard to know when he was being truthful or not, I'm told. But he had claimed he was in an abusive relationship, so he shot this guy. So maybe the prosecutors felt like there was some evidence or something to back up his claims, or he would be believable or something. And so they cut him a break. I mean, you kill somebody and then you get a 4-year sentence. That is pretty light. I think that's something like that is more in line with what the Menendez brothers, for example, should have gotten. But anyway. But yeah, so that, I don't know, that's a crazy situation. I will say this to you all. The guest that I had on my show the other night, the people who were involved with this guy and set up the GoFundMe, or partly set it up, helped set up, and took him on this road trip and were with him when he met Manson and all of that. Now that he has been sentenced or pled out, they want to tell the full story, because there were a lot of things apparently, and they told me at the time when I was interviewing them that they were holding a lot back, because they felt like it might be important to not disclose a number of things or get into a number of things while this was still an open case, and they didn't want to hurt anything like the prosecutor's case or speak out of turn. But now that this has been adjudicated, they tell me there's a ton of stuff that they want to talk about. And so so 3 of them are going to be returning, Mandy and Crystal and Kimberly. They're going to be returning, and we're going to do a live stream on Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Is that right? No, 1 p.m., 2 p.m. No, 12. No, noon. I think noon. We're still trying to figure it out. But noon Eastern, I believe, maybe 1 p.m. Eastern, but I'll announce it later. But on Sunday, and they're going to sit down with me, and they're going to actually do a live stream, and they're going to take your questions. And so they wanted to, again, like I said, set the record straight, and they wanted to really tell the whole story now, and a lot of stuff that they held back on, because again, it was an open case. But now that the guy has pled out, they want to talk about a lot of stuff apparently, and apparently a lot of crazy stuff that that they didn't tell me the first time, or they just alluded to the first time. And some things they told me off camera and I wasn't able to publish, and I was fine with that. But anyway, so this Sunday, I think around noon or 1 o'clock, I'm going to sit down with them. We're going to do a live stream. So the last thing, the last one we did, you'll remember, it was pre-recorded and it was edited, not in a way to distort or change anything, but it was edited. And this one obviously will not be, it'll be live, and you can ask your questions. And so any questions you have, I'm not saying we'll answer all of them, but we will try to do justice to your questions. And so if you want to see what they have to say, I think it'll be really interesting and some pretty crazy shit, honestly. And so that's going to be this Sunday on my channel, same channel. Check it out. But yeah, that's where things stand with that guy. What a crazy story. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, some of you who are true crime buffs and you're interested in the Menendez thing, just check out, as a little detour, check out a couple of videos recently on my channel, on this channel, in which I talk about a crazy psychopath stalker who stalked Marilyn Manson and pretended to be crippled and dying of leukemia and mute. He couldn't even speak. He was using like a speak and spell device that a lady, a Manson fan, apparently donated to him out of the kindness of her heart. He scammed some Manson fans out of thousands of dollars. It's a long story. Ended up getting a free or paid for trip to a couple of Manson concerts. Got to meet Manson, had a private meeting with him. I don't mean private like one-on-one, but like a meeting with him and the people he came with, meeting with Manson. And apparently, Manson was so warm and kind to him and believed him, certainly. And the whole thing was a scam, as it turns out. And it wasn't just Manson involved either. Some of these other bands were scammed too. Anyway, it's a long, crazy story, but I have a couple of videos already about it. And of course, meanwhile, he was on the lam. I left out the craziest part, of course, in that description. Meanwhile, he was on the lam, having basically skipped his bail. He was awaiting trial for killing his much older 58-year-old lover. And so he was awaiting trial for that, was not supposed to leave the state of Alabama, but he did. So that's why I say he was on the lam. But he was unauthorized to leave the state, left the state so he could go on this bucket list, once in a lifetime journey to follow Marilyn Manson around and get to meet him by pretending to be I think, younger boy, a teenage boy stricken with leukemia, who also couldn't speak and couldn't walk and needed a wheelchair and funds for a new wheelchair, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's crazy, crazy. So tune in on Sunday for more of that. But I do have a couple of videos, if you haven't seen them already, on my channel discussing that crazy situation. That is one of the things that I love about covering Marilyn Manson, and it's probably one of the main reasons why I have stuck with it for 4 years, even though I was not a Manson fan for most of this. Only recently, like I said, gaining an appreciation for his art. But I think one of the main reasons why I've stuck with this whole thing is because it's never boring. There are always new, crazy, unforeseen occurrences and detours and episodes in the Marilyn Manson saga. And it's not necessarily always related to the Me Too craziness, although God knows there's a ton of that, enough of that for several lifetimes. But just like this thing that came out of nowhere, it turns out this like crazy psychopathic, killer or what crazy, whatever, manipulative, narcissistic, scammed all these people, pretended to be all this stuff that he wasn't. I mean, just, this stuff, it seems like this stuff just happens to Manson. He cosmically attracts the crazies. I don't know. I don't know what y'all think, but I think it's interesting. Oh, yeah. Rob Fox says this is the funniest thing I've heard all day. Yeah, I don't know. I talked about it some on my channel and my Instagram. So after we get off here, you should go check out the videos on my channel. I did 2 of them. One was a long, like 2-hour, well, maybe an hour-long interview with the 4 people who were involved in this and took this guy on this trek to meet Manson and paid his way, were scammed out of money, et cetera, et cetera. They have some crazy shit to talk about. And then I did like a short synopsis also of the situation. But yeah. Weird. I'll tell you the funniest part to me of their story. When I was interviewing them, the people who took him, and they were and 2 of them were in a car because one was driving him, right? And the other is I think it was a van. The other is in a van. And then she took her wife also. So one of the people who was scammed, Mandy, she's married. So she took her wife. And so it was she and her wife. And then this man who was also helping and driving. And so they're taking this hoaxer, this talented Mr. Ripley guy, on this cross-country trek to go and meet Marilyn Manson. Meanwhile, he's on the lam, so to speak, or in waiting trial for killing his husband, like I said. But anyway, this is what's funny. Apparently, the guy had this Miles Phillips guy had or has or what have you a very strong opioid addiction. And it was, of course, he was masking it as end-stage leukemia. And so he told them, that he was on prescribed medication, pain medication, because he was faking having end-stage leukemia. So it made sense to them, right? He was going to question that. They thought the guy had leukemia, the kid had leukemia. But so apparently, though, when they talk about this in the interview, he was sneaking more than prescribed medication into the van. He was sneaking in, I guess, like extremely strong, powerful powdered fentanyl on this trip, and they had no idea, right? And so anyway, at one point, like he starts to, they said this in the interview, he starts to like show the signs of like sort of ODing, like he starts to like kind of like pass out and is like eyes rolling back and like I can't remember what they described, but like he's basically like they were afraid he was going to die. And so they're trying to figure out while they're in this van, right? And they're driving down the road and he's reacting this way physically. They're trying frantically to figure out if he took too much of something or what he might have taken. They can maybe call his parents or his doctor or whatever, but like they're trying to figure out what to do. And so they're frantically going through his stuff. And he sees them or notices them going through his stuff, and he gets panicked at that point that they're going to find the illegal substance that he's brought. And so, of course, he can't speak, right? Because he's pretending at this point to be mute for additional attention and donations and whatever, because he's crazy. He's got some kind of like Munchausen, Gypsy Rose thing. I don't know. But he's panicking that they're going to find this stuff, right? And so he starts like texting, because that's the only way he'll communicate with them, because he's pretending to be mute. He starts texting them, no, don't go through that. I there's some extra stuff in there. It's not just prescribed. There's some powdered fentanyl in there. I don't know. I just think about these poor, poor in the sense that I feel sorry for them. These really good-hearted people, and I talk to them again. I will on in the live stream on Sunday. But really good-hearted people that just got manipulated by this ridiculous, absurd human being in this ridiculous, absurd scenario. So I don't know. I do not know. But I was laughing. I was chuckling in that interview. Michael Brown, I did not know that you had cancer, and why would I know? Because it's not something, that you would typically announce if there weren't a reason, like right here. But I'm really sorry. Do you want to tell us, like, I don't know, it sounds so trite and superficial, but like how are you doing, or sort of what's going on? Or you don't have to. But I am sorry. That sounds really intense. And as you probably know, because you watch my streams, I've had family members deal with cancer, and some successfully and some, you could say, I don't want to say unsuccessfully, but theirs was terminal, and it is really hard. I know that. So whatever your journey is that you're on, I'm sorry, but if you'd like to share, feel free. But I appreciate your support. Sarkeesian, did you go away for a while? Sarkeesian says, still going? Fuck yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's I'm enjoying this tonight. It feels pretty low key. I think maybe it's because there are only 42 people on. It almost feels like I'm having some kind of like a slumber party or slumber party chat, fireside chat. I don't know. People don't do fireside chats much anymore, do they? Y'all have anything else you want to ask me? Let me go back and scroll through. Sorry, I'm just looking through your comments. Oh, Michael Brown had said earlier, I can't believe why anyone would lie about cancer. If I was going to lie, it would be about being a cowboy, astronaut, billionaire. Well, but you don't get donations or sympathy with that lie, but you do with but this person did with the cancer lie. They got quite a bit of mileage out of it because they got donations. They got a free trip, a couple of trips to see Manson, great tickets, ended up like right in front of him. Got to meet him, got the attention of the other bands. I put this in one of my videos, but two of the bands that opened for Manson and opened for Five Finger Death Punch, Slaughter to Prevail and The Funeral Portrait, they went out of their way too to sing to him, to this guy, to even stop the concert. Alex Terrible of Slaughter to Prevail stops the concert and goes in this long, like sort of like not lecture, but like this speech he gives in front of the crowd, like trying to connect with this guy and let him know, like, we're thinking about you, buddy, and all of this, and comes out and hugs him. And like, it was like that he got free merch. Like it was this extensive thing, like a talented Mr. Ripley thing, like really crazy. But it's disgusting that he would do that, for sure. It is disgusting and funny. Disgusting and funny. Oh man. Lyle Michael says Manson's birth chart shows hidden enemies through women. Well, they're not so hidden as of late. I wish they were hiding. I wish they would go back to the rock from under which they came. Oh my God. Oh man. So Michael Brown says, I'm okay. It started with esophagus cancer. So I had that removed. Then it spread to my adrenal gland. So I had that removed. Well, I appreciate you saying you're okay, but that sounds like anything but okay. And so I'm sorry that you've had to go through that, and you're facing that, all of that, and all of that entails. It's I know this is trite to say this, but it's amazing that we are in some ways as advanced as we are. That Tesla or that SpaceX is able to fire the rocket in the air and then catch the booster like perfectly, and all that stuff. But then at the same time, it seems like more important stuff like our health and something cancer as basic as cancer. I know cancer is complicated biologically, but something as basic as that so many people suffer from, and yet I know we're making advancements, but I wish that we had it licked, but for what that's worth. Okay, so Sarkeesian says, I just woke up and joined in. Very much love your psychology videos. Wanted to ask you if you had a chance, but did you watch the film Allure with Evan Rachel Wood? No, I didn't. I still haven't. And honestly, until you mentioned it just now, I forgot about it. You recommended that to me, right? And I said, oh, that sounds good, but I forgot about it. So I'm writing it down. No, I'll check it out. I'll tell you something, though. Those of you who, like me, detest Evan Rachel Wood and what she's done to Manson, but also think that she is a strangely compelling character in the way that a disturbed villain in a movie is compelling or interesting. I rewatched Mildred Pierce, the HBO series that she was in. She's not in every episode, but she's in the later ones. I think 3 episodes maybe. But I rewatched that series, Mildred Pierce, HBO. And in some ways it's interesting. In some ways, I think it's a little dull, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the point. She plays, in hindsight, I didn't realize this when I saw it the first time because she hadn't pulled her shit with Manson yet. So I didn't know really much of anything about her. But in hindsight, watching this again, whoa, the foreshadowing of and the revelation of who she really is. Like, she was playing herself, I think, in that in so many ways. But she's this extremely, in that movie, in that series, this extremely conniving, manipulative woman who knows just how to manipulate men into falling in love with her or having sex with her, or but she's caught. But then she sues them and gets money out of them for paternity, and she even threatens to frame one guy for underage sex, for having sex with her when she was underage, and she gets a big settlement out of him. She's yes, it's like, it's amazing. I watched it, and I was watching it with my significant other, and he said to me, he's like, wow, she's playing herself. And he doesn't even care about this Evan Rachel Wood Manson stuff. Like, it's not interesting to him, beyond the fact that, he feels sorry for Manson that he's going through this. But like, he said that on his own, though. I thought it was interesting. We were watching it, and he's like, wow, she's playing herself. But anyway, if you're interested in things that Evan Rachel Wood has starred in, that presage or prefigure or predict what she would become, what she would do to Manson, that's kind of an interesting one. A couple of episodes at least. But anyway, okay. Anything else? We do wish you the best, Michael, by the way, and thank you for that comment there. Yep, absolutely. Okay. Let me think of some things to talk about for 30 more minutes, because I'm drawing a blank at the moment. But yeah, let me take a break, a little bit more of a break, and get some water and come back, and we'll talk for 30 more minutes. And if you think of some things, put it in the list, and I'll see you in 5 minutes.
Hi. I don't talk much, but I just wanted to tell you thank you for everything. Hi. I don't talk much, but I just wanted to tell you thank you for everything.
And what are we dealing with?
You're dealing with a devious, diabolical mind.
If you want to put the blame, go after Miles Phillip, because he's the one that is responsible for everything. Because without him, this would have been a magical thing.
At what point then did you learn that he had killed someone or had been at least arrested for and accused of killing someone?
But when we started questioning all this stuff after the concert, like we were all Googling it, and I saw the mugshot and I sent that to Mandy.
He said one of his last wishes, like he said, my parents said I should do a bucket list of things I want to do before I die. And he's like, as the number one thing, I want to meet Marilyn Manson. And then he's like, what if we take a big poster and say, like, I have terminal cancer.
Get down with the sickness. Get down with the sickness. Get down with the sickness. Open up your hate and let everyone make. Get down with the sickness. You get down with the sickness. You get down with the sickness. And this is the gift that has been given to me.
The bucket list is to meet Marilyn Manson in person. And I said, okay.
Make sure we understand. You got to a place sort of near Manson's meet and greet, but it was going to be an effort to get to him. So he comes out to see you.
He actually came down the stairs and, he held Matthew up. I mean, the way he connected with me, he's a great guy. So
he picked Matthew up out of the wheelchair.
Well, he was holding him out of the wheelchair like that, holding him up for the pictures.
But Manson helped, picked him up out of his chair and held him.
Yeah. When I was getting him up, he helped get him up. I mean, he's a great guy. He showed Matthew just this love.
Let me ask you now. Also, Matthew at this point, Matthew Miles was pretending to be mute.
Right.
How did he communicate with Manson?
He used the tablet that a lady online ended up sending him.
So some kind lady donated this tablet, this communication tablet. And so describe it for me. He would write something and then it would speak?
Yeah.
What did they say to each other?
I know that Matthew told him that he loved him in the thing. And he goes, I love you too.
He said that? Manson said that? Yeah. He's got a big heart. That's what people who don't know him don't know.
You can feel his heart when you're around him. It's not something fake. So we got him dead center. And we were holding up the sign and the funeral portrait, dear God, loved them to death. Just such amazing people.
Alex from Slaughter to Prevail, and he came out on the stage while they were performing. And
yes, during his performance, he read the sign and he did a whole tribute to him. At 2 minutes.
He took a break and came into the audience where we were, and I recorded the whole thing. I'm bawling.
Oh my God! Yes!
I love you. Stay. It's so fucking got you eyes. I can smell. It's fucking sweet. You're great. You're great. You're great.
Where's your mama? Where's your mama? Your mama! Because my English is so broken, I have to make me a see Marilyn Manson completes my public worst episode sucks. Hey, first of all, much love for you. I really tried to keep my consciousness clean, keep my heart clean, because you never fucking know when you go there. I know. I can see that in your eyes. Your eyes are so pure. Really, thank you. It's true. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You can't hear me. Sorry. I was just laughing though. It was so nice of that guy to say that, but how ironic. Your eyes are so pure. How crazy. Here, I'm gonna show you a little more and then we'll move on, but what a crazy situation.
That his mother sent me a text message or a message on Messenger from his account. And she said, I just want to let you know that, you know, he had passed, and she sent me a screenshot. And I said, well, if he died, who are you? Why are you on his page? She said, and it just said mother. And I said, oh, so you're the mom. And the like, again, the dialogue was the same as how Matthew would talk to me. And I was like, and then in the end, he had sent me a picture of a little boy. It was an AI generated little boy that looked like Matthew with a pacifier in his mouth. And they said, our sweet baby Zach would be missed. Go ahead and feel free to make a post about him if you want, acknowledging the boys. And I said, oh, absolutely. I was playing along with it, you know. I said, yeah, for sure. I'll make a post and everything. It was a whole story.
Get on top of this, so I had to take extra security measures.
Sorry. When this whole scam basically started to implode, then he tried to fake his death on social media. In other words, he pretended to be his mom, reporting to people sadly that the leukemia, it finally took Matthew from us, or Miles. No, he was going by Matthew. It sadly took Matthew from us, but thank you for helping to make his bucket list dream come true, meeting Marilyn Manson. Oh man. Okay. So I don't know if I'll make 30 minutes, but because I'm starting to get tired, but I will stick around for a bit and answer questions. So the benefit. Someone want to talk about the benefits of. Oh, I lost the question of amphetamines. Just a second. Where I'm. Let's try to find. Who was that? You've asked that before, I think, or maybe there's just multiple people asking. I don't know. I think I make people angry. Oh, Rob Fox, you'll bring the weed. Well, see, I'm with you on that one, right? That is my medicine of choice, so to speak. But and I think, sorry, Mom, if you're listening, but I do think that my mom has come around to see it as not the most horrible thing in the world that she once did. So attitudes are definitely changing in Texas, as with the rest of the country on that one. But I don't know. I've made people mad talking about Adderall before, and how people. I think it's not healthy that it's so acceptable for society to give Adderall to lots of developing brains. And I know it comes off judgmental. I'm not trying to be like that. Like, if people want to do speed, talk about the benefits. I probably, when I was in grad school, I don't know if I could have finished that damned dissertation. Sorry to sound pretentious, but you have to write a book, a dissertation in grad school. And I did take Adderall off and on recreationally then to finish that, dude. And so I guess, like, if you have a task that you really, some big hurdle that you really need to finish, and it's like life or death, or it feels like that, maybe I guess you could say that it can be helpful. But I think in general, people pretty much most of the time getting strung out. And I had students. Let me say this: I've taught college for many years, and I had a lot of students that I saw who were really strung out and exhausted from the ADD drugs that they were often legally prescribed, but they would tell me at times that they didn't feel like it was good for them to be on it, but at times they would get pressure actually from their parents to stay on it, which it may sound kind of strange to us in a way, but that your parents would be pressuring you to stay on speed. But a number of them would say, like, I don't even really want to be on this, but like my parents, they want me to get straight A's, and and then they et cetera, right? You get the point. So anyway, okay, serious questions though. All right, no offense, maybe that was a serious question from you, but any other questions? I'll start at the bottom and go up. How about that? DBG says, I get lots of compliments on my Manson stuff when I'm out and about here lately, whereas at the beginning of the allegations, it was nothing but dirty looks. What kind of Manson stuff do you do? You're talking about like shirts, t-shirts and stuff like that? But that's good. I think that definitely people who pay attention to stuff, like, I think and just ordinary people, I think most people are tired of Me Too. Not that people think that there aren't bad guys abusing positions of power and so forth. Like, we all know that, but that it's gone too far, and that there are a lot of innocent guys who have been swept up in this thing without evidence, right? And so I do think a lot of opinions and attitudes toward Manson have changed on this, and so hope that they'll continue to. Doesn't seem like that documentary. I know it's only been released in Canada. It hasn't been released here yet. It doesn't seem like it's made any kind of a splash, though. And so I just hope, let me say this, y'all. I just hope that that new DA sees the light on the Manson stuff and that he doesn't decide to take this on as a cause. I hope that that press conference he did, that rally that he did with Esme Bianco, I hope that that was misguided, that he just hadn't looked into it, or it was some kind of a one-off or whatever, just to get some attention. But I really hope that when he gets into office, he doesn't take this on as a cause. And I know that when he asks his detectives for the file or for the report on this, I know that they're going to tell him there's no there. So, I mean, I hope then that he'll accept that and put an end to this. My God. Okay. What else? What else? What else? Any questions? Any questions? What's this? Sarkeesian girl, go watch the trailer. Wait, what are we talking about? Oh man. All right, AJ, thank you for posting my tip jar. Do appreciate it. I'm going to check PayPal again before I sign off because I'm terrible about not checking at the end and then missing someone leaving a donation and also a comment that they want me to read that I haven't read. Thank you for saying that, Rob. That's very nice. I appreciate that. Hey, do y'all want me to let you in on a secret, all 40 of you, that something that nobody knows? Well, okay, a few people know, but nobody in the audience knows. Some of you who are Manson fans, you might find this interesting. Okay. Oh, Sarkeesian asks me, have you ever been to Joe Rogan's comedy club? Would you go? Would you talk about your experience? Where is his comedy club? Is that in Austin? Is that why you're asking? Because I'm in Texas. I haven't, but that would be cool to go. Yeah. Next time I'm in Austin, I should do that. It's a good suggestion. Okay. So for those of you who have stuck it out with me for almost 3 hours, wow, let me let you have a little bit of news. If you're not a Manson fan or interested in the Manson stuff, then this won't mean much to you. But Manson is going to be performing at a music festival in Mexico, Monterrey, or somewhere near Monterrey, November 30th. Yeah, November 30th. And it sounds like it's going to be a really big deal and really awesome, and that he's going to be performing something special there. I don't want to give anything away, but I'm going to be going. God willing, inshallah, I am making preparations and plans to go. And so I'm going to be doing reporting from that. Hope to be doing a lot of reporting and some interesting exposés and obviously interviews with people outside. Be cool to get the perspective of Mexican fans on this because he's got a lot of them, and on Manson, his new music and all of that, and maybe some surprises for you of some kind. We'll see. I'm still thinking about it and putting it together. But yeah, that is on the docket. So my Manson coverage is not over, and I'm probably not going to make a big announcement or whatever because I really wanted to kind of surprise people with this, like just show up and be like, hey, everybody, I'm in Mexico covering Manson doing some cool shit at this music festival. But for those of you sticking with me for this almost 3 hours, I'll let you know that. So should be cool, and I'm going to try to provide a lot of really interesting stuff for you with that. So something to look forward to. But the Menendez thing is really interesting to me. And let me just give you, as I close here, let me give you a prediction, okay? One reason why, I guess the last reason I want to say why I'm interested in this, I've talked about the other stuff, but I guess the last reason is because I think that this thing is going to really blow up to be bigger than it is right now, especially if they are released. And I think that if they are released, then you can look forward to, at least for a period of time, Menendez mania, in the sense that I'm sure, maybe not, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be doing some kind of a press tour and interviews. And of course, they're not the same guys that they were when they were in court as young men decades ago, right? And a lot has happened to them, and they've been through a lot. And no matter what people think of them, they have an interesting, compelling story, right? And so I think that if they are released, that'll be really the beginning in a lot of ways of some of the media mania that we're going to see, and social media interest and interviews and things like that. So I'm going to keep talking about this, if for no other reason than that I think it is a really interesting, significant story, pop culturally speaking. And it's not too often that you have something happen decades before that was a huge deal and people were obsessed with and interested in, and then it kind of goes underground for a while, or it kind of like dips beneath the water, and for decades people aren't talking about it. And every now and then, like you would have maybe like a documentary or something, or people would reference it in a true crime podcast or what have you, but really more or less just kind of underwater, under the radar. And then a few years ago, you start to have more interest, more discussion, online social media, yes, documentaries, specials, and then this Ryan Murphy thing, which no matter what people think of it, or the Menendez brothers, they don't like aspects of it or whatever, but it cannot be denied that this has really caused a significant, really, eruption in interest now, and it's everywhere, and people are talking about it. People who don't even care or interested in it, so, are hearing about it. So I'm going to be talking about it more and doing shorter videos and some other types of stuff. And so, in addition to all the, the Manson coverage that I'll be continuing to provide. So you can expect that. If for no other reason, then I think it is going to be more and more a kind of a significant story for um, the pop culture environment that we're in right now. Okay. Thank you all so much. Thank you, AJ, especially my mod tonight. And yeah, it's late. Let's go to bed. Get a good night's sleep, everybody. And sweet dreams. Sweet dreams. Sorry, I'll be cheesy. But yeah, I'll talk to y'all later. Thanks so much. I will post in the comments my PayPal below. So if you're interested in donating, or you enjoyed this conversation and want to leave a tip, I will have that below. Okay. Thank you so much. And goodbye. If I can leave. It's like, psych. I forgot to turn it off. Just keep going. Just pick it up now for the 24 people who are still here. Were you talking amongst yourselves? No. No, I am leaving. I am saying goodnight, but I'm shutting it down. Thank y'all so much. I'll talk to you later.